Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. And I am joined here, as always, by the man who is trembling in fear going up against his Boston Bruins, going up against the Tampa Bay Lightning starting tonight. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. I feel kind of optimistic about the series. We'll see what happens. By the way, just so everybody knows who's watching on YouTube, we did not coordinate this. It just so
Right.
happened this way that we both wore our hockey jerseys. So, no, we did not plan for this to happen, but here we are.
No, we planned it. Kyle's lying.
Oh, yeah. Leave it to the Bruins and Lightning to still find a way to meet each other in the second round in the
Right.
newly realigned playoff format for the bubble. They still end up seeing each other in the second round.
It's fantastic, right? Because everyone was talking about how, oh man, Lightning and Bruins are going to get screwed over by this new playoff format, having to play each other in round two. And the one time they actually play each other in round two, it's not with the new format. Just fantastic. Just a middle finger from the hockey gods, I think. But we'll talk a little bit more about hockey first. For you football only fans, if you're watching on YouTube, there's the links in the description and in just down below on this bar. You can skip ahead if you want to. We're gonna talk a little bit about hockey. Also, if you listen to audio only, or you can listen to audio only if you're watching on YouTube, just go to any podcast distributor. And we're going to talk about a couple other things. We're going to break down the AFC East. We're going to talk about everything that we think is going to happen. We're going to do a playoff predictions, who's going to win Coach of the Year, MVP, Rookies of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, all that fun stuff. And on top of that, we're going to decide we're going to figure out who we think are going to win the Super Bowl. Should be a lot of fun stuff. But yeah, let's get into this, the hockey for a second. Again, I don't know. I feel like for Tampa Bay, it's just been so much pain recently. Last year was like the most devastating moment of my sports watching life, where after that game one and you knew they weren't going to win, I remember it was probably the lowest moment I had watching sports, which again, it's sports, but like such a devastating loss. And to win it in such a satisfying way against the Blue Jackets, game 5, where we were down 4-2, come back late in the third to win it. I kind of feel like, in a weird way, am I crazy? Is there more pressure on the Bruins to win this than the Lightning right now?
I think the Bruins are in a tough spot. I'm really worried. There was all that talk. Marchand said after those 3 play-in games, he's like, let's just call it what it is. This is preseason. And the Bruins ended up showing out in that Carolina series, proving that they're good enough. They're still good enough to win the Cup. I think that's what is really interesting is I would say Tampa Bay. I think this is a pretty wide open Stanley Cup playoff, as it usually is. I would say Tampa Bay, Lightning, and Vegas are the top 3 teams remaining. That's just a personal opinion. You can obviously disagree. I feel like those are the top 3 teams remaining, but I am worried about the Lightning essentially just outskating the Bruins, because I think that's a very real possibility with some of the guys in terms of age the Bruins have on their roster. And then the big thing that happened is, of course, we lose Tuukka Rask, who went home during the bubble for a family emergency. So now I think Halak's a good goalie. Is he good enough to win a Stanley Cup? I don't know. So I feel like that's going to be a huge problem for the Bruins, is that I could see Halak just caving in during this series.
Yeah, well, apparently Rask isn't good enough to win a Stanley Cup either. But no, that's a joke. I thought you're a pretty big fan of Rask. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like, Lightning don't have Stamkos. Like, both teams have key pieces missing. I think it's interesting. I don't know. I think Philadelphia is playing such good hockey. I'm not sure anyone can.
Well, so here's my thing. I feel like Tampa Bay, Boston, and Vegas are the top 3 teams. I think just in terms of pure talent and ability to play hockey. I think Philadelphia has the best goalie. And, you see many teams, especially last year with St. Louis, they were a good team, but eventually it was Binnington was the hot goalie that won them the Cup. The hot goalie wins the Cup a lot, and it could be Carter Hart this year, who looks, I think, really, he's fantastic. And, Philly's been plagued with goalie problems for years, and now they finally seems like they got a guy, which is a great thing for them. But I hate you. So Philly has the best goalie. The Islanders have the best coach in Barry Trotz, who just made the Capitals look like a complete wreck.
Mhm.
then the other three teams in the West have just been busy outscoring every team that they've played. The biggest
Mhm.
question with the Stars was, is there enough goals on their team? And then they've gone and scored 12 goals in their
Yeah.
last two games.
Mhm.
The Avalanche seems like they score 3 goals every game. And the Canucks just completely worked the Stanley Cup champions in the Blues. All three of those teams are just scoring at will. So really, I think all 8 teams, you see a realistic path that they make the Stanley Cup final, whether it's talent, whether it's the hot goalie, whether it's a great coaching and great scheme, or whether it's the offense is just red hot at the moment. All 8 teams have a legitimate path to the final.
Yeah, I don't know. As a Lightning fan, again, I'm not some super big hockey guy. I watch most Lightning games, and that's pretty much it. I just don't know if I have faith in Vasilevsky to not just all of a sudden have one random game. He's the kind of guy where it's like 90% of the time he's elite, and 10% of the time he looks like he shouldn't even be out there. Like he just has those weird moments where he'll let in these easy goals. And I was thinking about, like, he doesn't pass the eye test in both ways. Like there'll be games where I look at his numbers and I'm like, man, he looked great, and his numbers aren't very good. And there'll be games where I'm like, man, that was a rough one for Vasilevsky, but then he only lets in 1 goal. Like he's the weirdest goalie to watch in the NFL, and it's infuriating.
I still think he's good enough to win a cup. I mean, he's going to have the goalie advantage in this series. Halak let in some really I think he played well for the most part, filling in for Rask, but I do think that he let in some soft goals throughout that playoff series when he filled in. But I do think Vasilevsky's the better goalie in that one, and that's going to be a huge advantage. The question is, if they beat Boston and move on, is he good enough to beat a guy like Carter Hart? I'm not sure about that, because I think Carter Hart's already cementing himself as one of the best goalies in hockey.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. It's like I feel like you to win a cup, you need at least like one time. Like you need a Tim Thomas Game 7 against the Lightning in 2011. Like I'm going to take over and win this hockey game. And I'm just not sure if Assie's that guy, but we'll see. And we can, before everyone turns it off, the hockey talk, let's get back onto football. Crazy news happened. Earl Thomas is no longer a Baltimore Raven. I made a video, you posted it just shortly before this podcast is out, about their backup situation, how much it hurts. I think this hurts a good amount. I think this is a blow to the Baltimore Ravens. And they're losing. It's going to be $15 million in dead cap, even if it's considered conduct detrimental to the team. And if it isn't, they're losing $25 million in dead cap. And not to mention, you're losing a starting safety in what was probably the best secondary in the NFL. I think they could be okay. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but this is a blow for them. And I think it's fair to be a bit concerned about this if you're a Ravens fan.
Yeah, so you've said multiple times you think they're the best secondary in the league. Do you still think they're the best secondary in the league right now?
I think no. I think that now I would say no. I think that I would probably go Seattle now. I think it was either Seattle or I think because New England, they lost Patrick Chung, due to the opt out. So I actually think it could be interesting. I was thinking about the teams that I think could get Earl Thomas, and one of them could be the New England Patriots. Like this seems like it's a Patriots move. They have $35 million in cap space now with all the opt outs. I could see. Do you think obviously you're a Patriots fan. Do you think New England could end up rolling the dice on Earl Thomas?
I could see it. I mean, they brought in Adrian Phillips, who I think if he gets healthy, I think he can be a very good replacement for Chung. And I think he was going to kind of take on that third safety Deron Harmon role. I think that's where they really wanted him. But obviously he's going to fill in at that number 2 until eventually Duggar, who I think is a bigger safety that can play that role really well, is ready to go. I think Phillips is good enough to fill in that role for this season. And they have Terrence Brooks. Like, I'm not worried about New England secondary necessarily to where sure, if we had Earl Thomas, that's fantastic. I'd be very happy if we got Earl Thomas. But at the same time, if we have $35 million we're going to give to a prove-it year, I kind of think that finding someone next to Chase Winovich, which is, Jadeveon Clowney,
Right.
if it's someone like that I can get for a 1-year prove-it deal, even if it's like a $17 million prove-it deal, just 1 year of Clowney, I'd probably rather have than bringing in another guy on the secondary that I already think is going to be a top 5 or 6 secondary in the league. I think that there's too many other holes based on the opt-outs. We're going to talk about the Patriots, obviously. But, so I'd be okay with it. And then the other thing I have to look at Earl Thomas, I kind of defended him at that whole Seattle situation. I thought that was it was kind of a tough situation for them because he was getting hurt, but still, I thought he was a generational talent that, he was perfectly suited for what that defense was doing and thought he deserved the contract that he wanted. But at the same time, this is now the second team that he's fallen out of favor with. How many more chances is he going to get to prove that he's going to be a team player while also being that kind of talent?
Yeah, well, I think my kind of thing is like, I don't need you to be a team player. I just need you to be Earl Thomas. Like, if you don't want to, like, here's what I thought of when I saw all this. He's apparently showed up late to meetings. He's not, he's fallen out of the good graces of the Ravens. And I'm also a believer in stuff like that doesn't get out there unless someone wants it to get out there. I think that there was, some sort of thing got pushed through the media, and it's all reports too, I should say. So it's all speculation. But my kind of thing is like, I remember Bill Belichick, I believe it was, talking about Lawrence Taylor and talking about how like there was like Lawrence Taylor would show up to the meetings and he would fall asleep in the meetings. And at one point there was a coach that said, "Hey man, you got to stop falling asleep during these meetings." And he just walks up and he just writes down exactly what the play that the coach was talking about on the whiteboard, kind of saying like, "I know what I'm doing. I know what I have here." And my thing is like, if you have Lawrence Taylor, let him sleep during the meetings because he's still Lawrence Taylor. If you have Earl Thomas, I don't care if you're showing up during meetings. Like, I think you can have double standards for this kind of players. It's obviously different when he's getting into fights, but I also think fights do happen in training camp. I don't know. I think they should have tried to figure out a way to work it out, but maybe they did, and maybe they just figured they couldn't. I don't know. But I do have to say one thing: your take that the Baltimore Ravens are getting Antonio Brown. Not looking pretty good now. They got rid of Earl Thomas for character concerns.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if that was enough to push them over the edge, I can't imagine Antonio Brown coming into that situation.
Yeah.
I mean, the big thing with Brown is, you look at the family aspect, and obviously he's worked out with Lamar and his is it his cousin Hollywood Brown, something like that?
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're related in some way. I don't know exactly. Someone's going to comment correcting us here, but they're related in some way, so that made a lot of sense to me. But obviously, if that's enough to get rid of I think a Pro Bowl level safety, if not even better, then obviously that's a huge problem for Baltimore that Antonio Brown's not walking into the building then.
Oh, and by the way, one more thing, this narrative that Earl Thomas wasn't good anymore, it's infuriating to me. I mean, because he got outran by Nick Chubb in one game, and he got stiff-armed by Derrick Henry in another. Now all of a sudden he was really good last year. People let a couple of highlights they see. I guess on our NFL, there was like one of the top posts was Nick Chubb running by him. I'm like, yeah, he got Nick Chubb outran him. That's what I'm not that concerned about that. Okay, he's a free safety anyways. Whatever. I want to talk about a couple more teams that could potentially get him. Tell me what you think about this. You have San Francisco, who has $12 million in cap space. They have Jimmy Ward, but I think they could use an upgrade because Ward's only really had one good season. They have $12 million in cap space, and also it's the same system Earl Thomas played in Seattle. He's now would be playing next to Richard Sherman. Would this make sense?
I think that's a great fit, and I think that having him and Richard Sherman back would make a lot of sense. I think overall because they've proven that they can be an elite secondary together. Yeah, I'm all for that one, but I feel like you're going to run through a few teams here, but I want to hear the rest of your teams first. Go for it.
The other two, I have three more. Two of them are the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think that for kind of similar reasons, I almost feel like the Eagles, who have twice as much in cap space, might just give Earl Thomas a big deal so he stays away from Dallas out of spite. But I think that I could see either one of the. There's been a lot of talk about Dallas wanting to get him and potentially Philadelphia. I think that just makes sense. They could use some help in the secondary, and they have $24 million in cap space.
Yeah, I think it was immediately reported. I was just reading the ESPN piece, and Dallas, he's certainly batted his eyelashes at the Cowboys before, and the Cowboys have batted their eyelashes at him when he was having the contract disputes with Seattle. And obviously he's from Texas, so that was the big thing that people were connecting with that. I think that makes a lot of sense because that's a need, A, for the Cowboys, and B, that's where it seems like he's wanted to play his whole career anyways. So I could really see that happening on $10 to $12 million deal.
Yeah, and the one other team I had would be Houston. They have 21 million in cap space. I believe Kenny Stills tweeted out like, "Now we're good" about him. So I don't know how that would work if they signed him. But I think that he would fit that defense well, where put a free safety back. You saw how Kansas City was basically just sending receivers deep and beating them all game. This could sort of help out kind of their weaker, depth in the cornerback position. I could see this working out as well.
Yeah, I think that's another spot along with Dallas that I think, it's the same situation. He mentioned also that he wanted to be home closer to Houston too. I think that's a great fit for him too. I think I really think it's going to be one of those two teams. I think he ends up in Texas this year. If I'm going to make a prediction, it's one of those two.
Okay, sounds good. Well, all right. That's enough for just talking sports and the news. Let's get into the meat of this video, our in-depth division breakdown. And let's have you go ahead and explain how it works. I like doing this. I like when you explain it because it gives me a break.
Okay. Well, if anyone hasn't been listening to any of these podcasts, first of all, you're missing out. Go back and listen to all of them.
Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah. Second of all, so what we're going to do is break down each division. I'm going to start with ranking all the divisions 1 through 8. And I've been doing that for each one. And then what's going to happen from there is I'm going to rank who I think falls where in the division 1 through 4, or I'm going to go 4 through 1. So I'm going to start with the worst team in the division, work all the way to the best team. What then happens is Jackson has rated each individual position group on the team as far as offensive line, quarterback room, all that kind of stuff, which is the best. And we have a grading system for how all of these teams grade and how it stacks up against my predictions for where these teams fall. And then from there, we talk about each team and why we think they're gonna finish where they are.
Yes, exactly. And so why don't we first off talk about where did this division end up in your overall division rankings?
So quick editor's note, if you haven't been listening to the podcast, once again, shame on you. If you have been listening, we started this with the NFC East and I called it the worst division in football. That was because I had the Patriots down as a Super Bowl contender. I thought that there was a very real scenario with Cam Newton that this team could be the third best team in the AFC. And if they're the third best team in the AFC, that means I see a realistic scenario where they make the Super Bowl. With the number of opt-outs they've had, I have since taken them off the Super Bowl number and I've put them as a playoff team. I think that they are going to make the playoffs, but they are a playoff team. I don't think that they're good enough to make a Super Bowl because of all the opt-outs. So I have 2 playoff teams and then 2 teams that I have as potential first-round picks. Not saying that they're going to be the worst team in football, but there is definitely a direct scenario where these 2 teams end up as a top overall pick. So that puts this division as the worst in football now. I moved them below the NFC East because I take the Patriots off that Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I think that this is probably the most difficult division to evaluate. I think there's so many. It seems like every single team in this division has the mindset of let's just get let's get 52 talented players on our roster instead of let's get 22 talented starters on our roster. That's worked for New England for quite some time. I think there's some real logic behind it, but it also makes for a very difficult evaluation process when you are trying to go through it and look at the paper because you have to go so far deep to really find everybody. I think I agree. I think I do agree. I think that although I do have to say it's like, and we can get into it more, but yeah, I think this is definitely an interesting division to talk about. Why don't you just go ahead and get us started and pick who you think is going to finish last in this division?
So I think there's a really great debate between the bottom 2 teams and the top 2 teams. I think anyone can pretty much figure who are the top 2 teams and who are the bottom 2 teams in this division. But I think there's a pretty good debate on who's the worst of the 2 and who's the best of the 2. In the end, I actually went for the Jets as the worst team in the division. I think that the Jets still have a pretty bad offensive line, and I think that's going to be a huge problem. They obviously lose a guy in Jamal Adams, who was a all-pro player at the defensive level. And if I'm evaluating between the bottom 2 teams in this division, there's one that I really like the head coach, and there's one where I hate the head coach. So if I'm going to go for the worst team in the division, I'm picking the one who I think is the worst head coach in the division, and that for me is Adam Gase and the Jets.
Yeah, I think that's not unfair. And we'll just get into it. Adam Gase, he gets a number 2 right away for a head coach. He finished in the bottom 6 of my head coach rankings. Also for the quarterback room, so Sam Darnold, he was getting a 3. Again, a lot of it is because he's just the most. Again, I say that this is the most difficult division to evaluate. Darnold is the most difficult quarterback to evaluate because he's had just such a terrible supporting cast for his entire career. This is the best offense he's had, and that's not saying much. But I do think that maybe we could see a little bit more from him this year, but he's getting a 3 because, again, that's just where he ended up on the quarterback rankings. I'm going to move the quarterback room up to a 4, though, because they have elite Joe Flacco, and there is no way I cannot move them up with Flacco on it. But I actually, legitimately, biases aside, I think that he is a good enough backup to give them up a point as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's still, 2-3 years removed from actually being a starter in the league. So I think that's completely fair.
Last year he was a starter.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Technically. I guess it depends on how you define a starter, but
a solidified starter where he wasn't warming the seat for a backup, for a rookie, I guess is how I should word it. I think that this is a really big make or break season for both Gase and Darnold. Darnold has obviously had his health issues, and he's had, you could debate one of the worst offensive lines for one of these young quarterbacks. And I think that's been a big issue for him overall. But, you got to see some more of the promise that, people have been talking about as far as Darnold goes. I think this is a big make or break season for him. And Gase, I just don't think is a very good head coach. I think he's he's going to be a candidate for me for first coach fired, along with a few of the other guys like Patricia, Marone, and I can go back and forth. Dan Quinn, too, is going to be up there, too. I think that it's not very good that when you're supposed to be a quarterback guru, when you leave rooms, that the quarterbacks get better. Ryan Tannehill had his best year when he separated from Adam Gase, and I don't think Darnold has really improved much at all under Adam Gase, and this is supposed to be what he's good at. If he's not good at that, then why is he a head coach in my book? So I think Gase is probably looking out the door by the end of the season.
Well, the one thing Adam Gase has done well is bring in Greg Williams, who is one of maybe the best pure defensive coordinator. He's probably never going to get a head coaching role because of, the Bounty Gate stuff back in the day. But I do think, and again, I don't factor that into head coach. That's one of the areas where this grading system is flawed. It's not really a great grading system in general. I don't know why you guys watch this, but I do think that Greg Williams is, I think he's very talented. I think he's kind of the bright spot, and maybe that could actually go against Adam Gase. You could see them pulling the Cleveland Browns and firing Gase after like 5 games and then having Williams basically be their interim head coach. But yeah, we'll move on to the offensive line. They've done a lot of subtle moves to this offensive line, which I think is actually, I probably haven't given them credit for it, but I think that they've done some subtle moves that I think is going to help them. We'll start things off with, you have Connor McGovern, who is he's sort of a pass blocking center, which is definitely rare. He was a guard. They moved him to center. But as far as pass blocking centers go, he does what he does very well. Not the best in run, which again, odd for a center, but it has value. You have Alex Lewis, and I feel like Alex Lewis is kind of the line where if you're worse than him, you shouldn't be starting, and if you're better than him, you should be starting. He's kind of like right on that line. So, replacement level player for Alex Lewis. You also have Greg Van Roten, who is he's one of the people they brought on. Good in pass, he's serviceable in the run, and then you have obviously they added Mekhi Becton. That's the headline. And they added George Fant as their other tackle, who is solid but inconsistent. In my opinion, he is not worth the 3-year, $30 million contract they got from Seattle, but they clearly just needed a tackle, and so they were willing to overpay. I think this line's actually not terrible. I think that they have basically 4 out of 5 guys I think are like solid. I think that there's one, Alex Lewis is the one I would say they need an improvement on. I'm going to give it a 6.
Yeah, we were talking about the NFL draft a few months back, obviously, when it was happening, and we talked about our favorite prospects. And I think we both had the feeling that the top 4 tackles are guys who were probably ready to start right away. Those top 4 tackles taken. If I remember correctly, I believe you're an Andrew Thomas guy. That was the guy you liked, number 1. I did like Becton first, just because I felt like long term, I feel like he could be the best player, just because not many people are as physically ridiculous as he is, because he's 6'7", 360, and can just, move human beings like nobody else can. But I do think that Becton's the biggest project of the 4. I think that he needs to get better in his pass blocking technique, and that's something he's got to improve. So that's going to be a big thing for them. And the one thing, as far as it goes to McGovern and Van Roten as well, is the biggest question you have with certain players, especially, you know, how are they, performing on contract years compared to their overall career? Are these guys going to regress now that they're no longer on contract years and they got paid, or are they going to prove that that year was really worth what they were paid for? So that's the biggest questions I have. Can these guys continue to improve now that they're not on a contract season?
Yes, and you don't have to worry about that with George Fant because you already intentionally overpaid him, so you got that going for you. No, I mean, again, like I get it. You have to overpay in free agency. I don't think it was like a terrible contract by any means. Yeah, I think that they should have a solid. The best line Darnold has had since entering the league, at least. We'll go to the wide receivers.
That's not saying much.
Yeah, no, yeah, really damning with faint praise there. I'll go on to wide receivers. I think the headliner is Denzel Mims, another rookie that got in the second round. You also have Brashad Perriman, Jamison Crowder, who I think Crowder's underrated. He had some good years in Washington, then kind of sort of fell off a little bit, but had a bounce back year in his first year with the Jets. So I think there's value there for sure. But again, I don't love this receiving core right now. I think that you're basically relying on Mims to, as a first-year rookie, be your number one guy for this to be anywhere considered a good receiving core. I think that they're kind of a player away, but they're a very good player away. So I'm going to give the wide receiving room a 3.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought wide receiver was a big need for them, and obviously getting Mims was a way to address that. The thing I found interesting is that it seems like to at least start the season until they feel like Mims is ready, there's a good chance Brashard Perriman's their number one receiver to start the year. And they essentially went from Robbie Anderson, who I thought was a 2 or a 3, overplaying himself as a 1 for the Jets, to Brashad Perriman, who's probably a 2 or a 3, overplaying himself as the 1 for the Jets. So they essentially swapped out Anderson for Perriman, and I still feel like it's a pretty bad I wouldn't say bad. I guess mediocre is a better word because it's a bunch of mid-tier talents, and they're, like you said, they're missing the big guy. They're missing the guy who can go and just get 8 catches a game when they really need it.
Exactly, and I think like with Perriman, I watched him closely with Tampa Bay. He is Bucs fans wanted him cut after like week 6, like because he was making so many blunders. He did have some good games once Godwin and Evans went down with injury. He was actually pretty good those last 3 games of the season. Which is why he got the contract with New York. But I think the question is, was he just a product of the Jameis Winston, Bruce Arians offense, or is that actually who he is? We'll find out. We'll go to the backs. I actually am maybe the only person in this camp, but I still believe Le'Veon Bell is not washed up. I think a lot of what happened last year was due to the atrocious blocking in front of him. I think it should be slightly better, but again, he is getting up there in age. They have another guy who is getting up there in age, Frank Gore, still in the league. He's never going to retire. And they also drafted a 4th rounder. So I'm going to get the backs a 5 because I'm pretty high on Bell. It's still not a great running back room, but I think Bell is better than people realize.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. This was, it was essentially him trying to run up the middle and then having to turn and run horizontal the entire season last year. That's how bad the offensive line was. Maybe they carve out a little bit more holes for him and it improves. I think the big thing with him is that he's got to, he's someone who's always been a pretty good receiving back. He's got to be an option for Darnold all season. I think that that's going to be the big thing. If he's a good receiving back, then I think this offense can actually be pretty good because the receiving core isn't very good, but he's a guy who can make plays out of the backfield, whether it's catching or running. And I think that's something that he needs to provide. And then obviously I think Gore is going to be able to limit some of the carries for him because I don't think Gore has much left in the tank, but I've been saying that for 5 years and here he is still running pretty strong. And I think that if you're limiting the touches on Bell, that's probably a good thing at this point, because you have to question how much is left in him. But I think in those limited touches, he can be very good. I guess is how I should put it. And so I think he's going to have a good year. I think he's going to bounce back.
Yeah, agreed. We'll move on to finish off the offense with tight ends. This tight end group, very underrated. Ryan Griffin, I think he can be a number 1 tight end. I think he's a kind of a do-it-your-all guy. He made my all underrated team on the video I made this week. I think he is very underrated. You also have Chris Herndon, who is a fantastic receiving tight end. He might be someone to look at in fantasy football as maybe a sleeper. I'm going to give this tight end grouping an 8 right here.
Yeah, this is the best part of their offense, which, if the best part of your team's your tight end group, that's, you take that as it is. As far as offense goes, I should clarify. I think this is a really good group. I'm with you there that, this is where they're going to look to make plays over the middle of the field. Um, I think it's a good group. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. So for their offense, they get a respectable 6.5. I made a joke about their offense last podcast, but 6.5, not a terrible offense whatsoever. I'm trying to figure out where exactly that means they placed. Yeah. So they placed 17th. So, a mediocre offense, which is the best they've had in quite some time.
Yeah. And of course, you graded this a little higher because the offensive line can't get much worse. And adding these players means that it should be a little bit better. Now, the question is it going to be good enough that this team makes enough plays? Because if the offensive line craters once again, this is a team that I think is going to be very bad again. And that's why I put them at 4th, because I think this offensive line still has the potential to be a very bad offensive line and kind of crush all of their dreams as far as how good this team can be.
Yeah, I think this is it's going to be interesting to see. Did they fix things, or did they just put some duct tape on a leaky faucet? We'll see. We'll go on to the defense now. Defense was probably a top 10 unit last year. And I do think a lot of it, I mentioned Greg Williams. I do think a lot of it was Greg Williams. I also think a lot of it was Jamal Adams. But they still have Greg Williams, so they have that going for them. We'll start with the defensive line. You have Terrell Basham, who I think is a good run defending edge guy. You also have Jordan Jenkins, who I actually really like. Jordan Jenkins. I think he's he had 15 sacks in the past 2 years. I suspect he'll get 10 sacks this season. They also drafted a player in the 3rd round for the edge. I think this edge is pretty good. I gave him a 6. I could probably be talking to higher, but I'm going to give them a 6. For the interior defensive line, this is interesting. You have Quinnen Williams, who only the Jets could have somehow screwed this up. He was considered as big of a prospect as Bosa. Did not look good his rookie year, but again, there's a long list of defensive tackles that looked like busts after one season and turned it around. So let's not count them out just yet, but I do think there is some real concerns. You also have Steve McLendon, who is a really good run defender, but he's 34, so that's kind of the flip side. You also have Henry Anderson, who I think is just more of a depth guy than a starter. Definitely not worth his $8.5 million contract, in my opinion. So I'm going to give the interior defensive line a 4. Again, I could be talking to higher, and it has a lot of potential. This is something that could end up being like a 9 if Quinnen Williams shows up. But McLendon's age worries me, and Williams is bad football play in his rookie season worries me. So a 10 out of 20 for their defensive line.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think the biggest question this defensive line is going to have is, can they create enough pressure on some of these passers? You mentioned Jenkins. I think he's the high mark of this entire, pass rushing interior defensive line group. But is he going to have enough help around him to be able to cause some pressure on some quarterbacks? That's not really, I think pass rushing is probably one of the most important things in football, especially in the modern age where everyone's throwing the ball all the time. And to be bad at it is kind of bad for a defense and doesn't bode well, I think. But I think that they're going to be able to generate some pressure. It just depends on if it's going to be enough. I'm not sure really how I feel about Williams yet. I guess I'm not ready to call him bust because he was such a high prospect, but we'll see what happens. And then, of course, they drafted a guy, Jabari Zuniga as well, who is probably I called him before the draft the Justin Herbert of defensive ends, because he's a guy that looks great on paper because he's huge, he's fast, he's athletic. But then you also look at it and, he has 2 pressures in like the biggest game of Florida's season. And you're like, oh, wait, that's why this guy is not very good. So we'll see what happens with that. Maybe he turns it around because he is a very good athlete, but he was also missed a lot during the season and also couldn't stay healthy. Maybe he can provide some pass rushing, but I'm not very convinced on him. I have a lot of questions about this defensive line, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Also, complete non sequitur, but I might be in on Justin Herbert now. I was watching some practice. I made a video about this. I'm watching some practice. His fundamentals, he's like a completely different quarterback. And that was like the 2 things I was worried about him, were his fundamentals and his accuracy. I think a lot of his accuracy problems came from the fundamentals. I don't know if that's going to fix his accuracy, but I'm a lot more interested in Herbert than I was when he was drafted.
I mean, I think Herbert can be good. And it's a very Justin Herbert thing to look very good in practice, in my opinion. I think that he's a guy who, when the lights aren't on him, he's going to look fantastic. And he's a giant quarterback. He's athletic. He throws a great ball. But I thought there was too many times at Oregon where it was a big game. They really needed him to pull through, and he didn't. They had world-class talent. Oregon was better than every team in the Pac-12. They should have went 11-1. And there was just too many games where I feel like he just wasn't there making plays. That's my Justin Herbert rant, basically. I need to see him do it in a big game. Back to the AFC East.
Yes, back to the New York Jets. Only we could get into a Justin Herbert debate in the middle of talking about the New York Jets. But we'll go back. We'll go over to linebackers now. Linebackers that aren't edge. You have Neville Hewitt, who is really just a depth guy, in my opinion. You have Avery Williamson, who I like. I think he's a consistent, really good run defender. Who I think that if he was opposite C.J. Mosley, you're looking at a very good linebacking core. C.J. Mosley isn't going to be there. C.J. Mosley opted out. Looks like maybe their number 2 guy might end up being Patrick Onwuasor from Baltimore, who is I think he's kind of like that. I like him as a third guy. I'm not sure I like him as a starter. So the fact that it looks like he's going to end up being a starter, I'm not sure if I love that. I think that the Mosley opting out, that's a problem. Linebacking group that aren't edge, they're getting a 3 in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That Mosley opting out is devastating because him and Willie, this was the strength of the defense, I think, this interior linebacking group with him and Williamson. But now you have a guy who was supposed to be their number 3 playing the number 2, guy who was number 4 playing the number 3. You have a bunch of guys probably not good enough for their roles. And I think that's going to be a big problem too. Just throughout the season is how good can those guys be and can they play up to that level that they're being asked to play at?
Yeah, and the good thing is, they play 3-4, and they're going to play a lot of nickel. So, there'll be plenty of plays where they just have one linebacker out there. So you got that going for you. But regardless, I can't give it more than if you only have one guy that I feel is worthy of a starter. I can't give you above a 3. But again, someone could step up. That makes them a lot better. So that's always why these evaluations are they're guesses. It's all about percentages. I always like to say, like, I don't know anything. I'm just making predictions. We'll finish it off with secondary. So first we'll go with Brian Poole, who is probably their best player, although he's really a slot corner. He's a great slot corner. He's one of the best, if not the best, pure slot corners in the league. You also have Pierre Desir, who is I'm not sure about him being a number 1 guy, but I do like him he's a starting corner. I'm just not sure about him as a number 1. You also have Basan Austin, who was a 6th-round rookie in 2019, who only played 7 games, but he actually looked really good in those games, so keep an eye out for him. He could end up being a starter. They also drafted Ashton Davis in the 3rd round, and they have for safeties, they have Marcus Maine, who I think is actually really good. He's kind of overshadowed by Jamal Adams because, Jamal Adams is obviously insane. Now, if Adams gone, I think Maine might get a little more credit. And you have Bradley McDougall, who we all know about. He's been talked to death because he was a part of the Jamal Adams trade. I'm going to get the secondary in 8. Secondary is easily the best part of this defense. In my opinion, I think the defense ends up getting a 5.2, but I think it's actually a lot better than that 5.2 score says it is. I think this is actually a pretty decent defense just because of, Greg Williams, he's going to blitz the hell out of you, and he has secondary players who can sort of, play man coverage, which is actually what a lot of these teams do. So pretty much every team in this division kind of plays cover 1 man a lot. So overall, their team is going to get a 4.9, one of the worst scores that any team has gotten in this list. Again, I don't think they're that bad because I think their defensive score is worse than it says, but they're ending up being tied for 29th with the Jaguars.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the secondary is going to be pretty good. You mentioned Poole. I agree with you. He's one of the best nickel corners. I actually kind of like Kenny Moore a lot more in Indianapolis, but I think he's up there as well. Shout out to Valdosta State, Kenny Moore, by the way. Anyway, I think that this can be a very good secondary. A guy to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if he's going to play this year, but Bryce Hall could be a big option for them too if he gets healthy. He was a guy that a lot of people saw picked in the 1st or 2nd round if he was healthy. He tore his ACL though last year with Virginia. He was the best player probably on their team, definitely on their defense. If he can get healthy, I think he could be a big option for them as well. But the question is he going to get healthy? I think McDougall's going to be an interesting case of how does this secondary hold up? I think he's a good safety. But obviously this secondary was great because they had a great safety in Jamal Adams. Can he fill that role and still be that good is going to be the biggest question for me.
Yeah, especially with, how Jamal Adams is so perfect for the Greg Williams system. Of he was that sort of he really was the straw that stirred the drink in that defense, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think a lot of people are hoping that they can make the playoffs. I think it's possible. Like, I think they need some things to go their way. I think they're probably going to need a couple of surprise breakouts in positions of need for them to make the playoffs. But I don't think that there's a 0% chance. But I think that the Jamal Adams trade is going to hurt them in the short term. I think they might still be a year or two away.
Yeah, I think I'm drawing a blank on the GM's name that came in. I think he's done a good job. I think he's a very good GM, and I think that they're going in the right direction. I don't think it's happening this season, but I think this is a situation where they can end up with another top 10 pick. They obviously have the first from Seattle as well. I think that this team can get good very quickly. But you got to kind of see what pieces are worth keeping around and which ones aren't. Is Darnold going to be the guy long term? That's going to be a big question. Is this receiving group, what do you need to add this receiving group to make it really good? The defense, is Quinnen Williams going to be the guy, or do you need to get another defensive tackle? I think there's just too many guys where you're like, is this guy going to be good enough to keep around? That's why I have them fourth.
Yes. Joe Douglas, the GM's name.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we can move on to the number 3 team. We just did 25 minutes on the Jets. Didn't expect to go that long on them. But like I said, there's some interesting teams to talk about here. So we'll move on to who do you have finishing above the Jets, but below the Patriots and Bills?
Yeah. I think this isn't really that big of a debate. I think it's obviously Miami. I think that they had the worst roster in the league by far last year, and you could probably debate it's one of the worst rosters in the league again. I don't think it is. I think there are some good players here, especially as they paid a lot of money for that secondary. That's going to be. Is it the most expensive secondary in football? It's got to be up there at least. And
I don't know, but yes, I don't know that for sure, but it definitely is.
But I think that the one thing that went well was it seems like the coach they got's really good. I think Brian Flores had that team motivated, ready to play each week when it seemed like that they were just ready to tank the whole season. They still got the quarterback they wanted, even with tanking. And I think Flores is a really good coach, and that's why they have him over the Jets. They're obviously not going to be good enough to beat the Bills or the Patriots in the division.
Yeah, I think that you could debate that last year the best thing to happen to Miami was Tua getting injured. I think that definitely played out. I don't think they get him if he stays healthy, or at least they would have had to give up more assets to do it. Obviously, the downside is you have an injured quarterback. But let's just we'll talk about Brian Flores first. He gets a 4 here. I had him a little bit lower, just slightly below the mediocre range. And again, you got to rank the coaches. I feel like if I just did it naturally, I would have given them a lot higher grades. But I think that one concern I have with Flores is that it's one thing to take a bad team and have them win 5 games. It's another thing to take a team that is a playoff team and have them win a Super Bowl. So I think that the second thing is a lot more difficult. I remember Todd Bowles, he was consistently taking these bad Jets teams and having them win 5-6 games. And people are like, what a good job he's doing. But then kind of turned into that's kind of all he can do as a head coach. But again, I still do like him a lot. We'll just have to see. He's second-year head coach. We have to sort of see. That's why he's getting the lower grade. For quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick also gets a 4. But I'm going to bump them up a point because I do think that with the Fitzpatrick Tua, whoever ends up being the starter, I think that that's enough that I'm going to give them an extra point for the quarterback room. So 5 for quarterback, 4 for head coach.
Yeah, I think Flores did a really good job, but I'm with you there. I think a lot of first-year head coaches, I've said this before, I temper a lot of my rankings and my expectations for coaches in their first couple of seasons. I think it's a job you really have to work into to really show how good or how bad you can be. I think Flores can be a good coach. He's obviously really good on the defensive side of the ball, and he's proven that. But yeah, I think that it's going to take a couple of years to see how good of a coach a lot of these, first or second year guys are. And I think he's in that boat. But I was a big fan of what they did. I was a big fan that he was able to get 5 wins out of that team. But can they hit the next level? We'll see. Fitzpatrick is, you mentioned with the offensive line for the Jets, I forgot who you mentioned it for, of if you're better than him, you should be a starter. If you're worse than him, you should be a backup. That's essentially Ryan Fitzpatrick definition in a nutshell. He's essentially been that guy his entire career who's basically warming the seat. And that's Tua who's coming in next. I had Tua Tagovailoa as the number 1 quarterback last year. I thought if he stayed healthy throughout the season, I still would have taken him over Burrow just because his ability to read coverage, which he's done since his freshman year, is pretty remarkable. And I think that he has that kind of talent. But obviously getting hurt and the injury history is the question with Tua. And that's probably why he's not going to start the season, I think, but he's someone who I think has the highest ceiling of any quarterback that was drafted this year.
Also, Ryan Fitzpatrick made my all-exciting team that I made in a video last week. That was a fun video to make. Moving on to the offensive line. It was not a good line last year, although it did look better once Josh Rosen got out of there, as most offensive lines do. We'll start off with the center, Ted Carreras. You probably know a bit about him. He's coming over from New England. He looks pretty good in his first year as a starter, I think. You have Eric Flowers, another guy who obviously a lot of people know was famously a big bust that the Giants drafted him to be a starting tackle. Didn't work out so well. But when he moved over to guard with Washington, played pretty well and earned a 3-year, $30 million contract with Miami. Now you have a Shaq Kallorn who wasn't great as a rookie, but he was banged up and also only played 400 snaps. So we'll kind of have to. He's a question mark for sure. And it looks like both their starting tackles might end up being rookies with Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt. So a lot of question marks here. A couple pieces that I think should be solid. It could end up being a very good line. Will probably end up being mediocre. Could even end up being bad. I'm going to give this line a 4.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking this as we were getting ready for this. With the Jets and Dolphins, their offensive lines are kind of like a big shrug because it's like they've added so many players. Who knows how this, all pieces together. I think Ted Karras is a solid blocking center. One random point, just as someone who had to watch him all last season, he's got the slowest shotgun snap I've ever seen in my entire life. That ball literally floats for a second as it takes to get to the quarterback. Besides the point, I thought he filled in pretty good. He just wasn't David Andrews. And, with David Andrews back, obviously he lost that spot. And obviously it's great that he's going to get another starting job. The tackles concern me because obviously 2 young tackles is a big question mark. And I thought Austin Jackson wasn't a first-round level tackle. And he was taken in the first round. He was their last first-round pick. I thought of all the tackles taken in the first round, he had the biggest question marks. I still think he can be kind of a mess at times as far as a pass blocker. But we'll see. They drafted him out. He could develop into a better player overall. But I have questions about the tackle group for this team.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. Definitely a big question. A lot of these position groups end up being a big question mark, especially with New England, but we'll get to that in a second. For wide receivers, I think the big question of wide receivers is who's going to fill up the 2 and 3 role. You have Preston Williams, who had 428 yards in just over 404 snaps. So you stretch that out to a full season. He's a 1,000-yard guy. But again, a lot easier to do it in 400 snaps than in 1,000 snaps. You have Jakeem Grant, who he's a speed guy. He can't catch, but he's a wide receiver, so he doesn't have to. I think that he has potential, but he's entering his 5th season, and I'm not quite sure how much I trust that he's going to finally break out. But his floor is still, I think, like a solid 3 guy. And you also, of course, have Stephon Gilmore Sr. on Devontae Parker wrote the wrong. My notes were wrong there. My bad on that one. But yeah, wide receivers get a 5.
Yeah, listen, this is one development of the offseason that I think needs to calm down. Devontae Parker, you've had one good year your entire career. Let's calm down a little bit before you're calling everybody out. You had a good game against Gilmore, sure. But there was also that game week 2 of the season where you had 7 targets, 0 receptions, 0 yards. So let's calm down a little bit before you're ready to call everybody out. I think he's a good receiver, but he had one good year. So let's calm down. So I think
so you're saying if you have one bad game, that might mean that you maybe don't deserve too much hype. Maybe wouldn't deserve like a defensive player of the year or something. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, he was the best player for 15 games of the year, so I'm all for it. So he
was Parker? Yeah, I guess that's
fair.
No,
Stephon Gilmore was the best player for 15 games of the season.
Oh, get out of here.
He was deservedly defensive player of the year.
I'm going to say this in the Dolphins segments because people that skip to the Patriots won't get mad at me. Worst defensive player of the year season by a player maybe ever in my lifetime. No doubt about it.
Wow. I'm about to log off of this right now. Anyway, so I think Parker's good. Obviously, it's the depth that I think is a question. You mentioned Preston Williams. I still feel like that they need another guy. But I think it's a solid group overall.
Yes, especially with Devontae Parker when he's going up against Gilmore. We'll move on to the halfbacks now. Halfbacks, I think you have Jordan Howard, Matt Breida. I'm going to give them a 3. Like, they're both guys they're both names. I'm not really sure how much potential they have. We can also move, we'll double up the tight ends. You have Mike, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but I should because he's very good. Mike Gesicki, whatever. He had, maybe, he had the, your typical tight end second year jump last year. I think he's a very good all around tight end. You also have Durham Smith, who's he's a blocking tight end. He's a role player, but he plays his role well. Tight ends get a 7, backs get a 3.
Yeah, I think it's Gesicki. I'm gonna go with that. If it's wrong, somebody tell me. I'm gonna go with Gesicki. I really like him as a tight end. He's their best pass catcher among their wide receivers and tight ends. Yeah, I hate you, Devontae Parker. Calm down. You had one good year. Yeah, the running backs. Is Jordan Howard?
Wait a second. No, how is Gesicki a better receiving target than Devontae Parker?
I'm just messing with you.
Okay.
No, I still think Devontae Parker needs to calm down a little. But overall, I think that this is a good tight end. And then I think, is Jordan Howard probably the most overrated running back of like the last 5 years? I feel like everyone's really excited when they have him. And then when they actually see him play, it's like, oh, he's got another 13 carries for 47-yard game.
No, you just hate the Dolphins. No, he was very good, but when he was at the Jets for a couple of years, and he's gotten injured, and he hasn't been the same guy.
When was he? He was on the Bears, right? Oh, I still think
that's where he got all his hype from, was with Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that he's going to be very good. I don't think he's good at all. And
right? No,
I feel like
agree.
it's a. I think he's a guy that everyone's really excited to have, but then when they actually see him play, I don't think he's been very good for 3 years. So I don't know.
Who's excited? What Dolphins are there really Dolphins fans going out and buying Jordan Howard jerseys?
Yeah. Are there really Dolphins fans who know that they have a season coming up this year? I don't know.
But I don't get that. Are you saying there's no Dolphins fans?
They're very passive.
Okay. Well, weird shot at the Dolphins fan base now. Let's try to just move on and let's just stick with football for a time. This has gotten very, very heated when I made a joke about...
I'm heated. Devontae Parker, you took a shot at my man Gilmore, who was the best defensive player in football last year. I'm heated.
Okay, how about this? Devontae Parker wasn't even that good week 17. It was just that Gilmore was so bad he made him look good. Are we good now?
No, let's just move on.
Okay. We'll move on to the defense now. Defensive line. We'll start off with Vince Spiegel, who's out of the season. He's out for the season with an injury. They added on Kyle Van Noy from, of course, New England, because every team that has a New England former coordinator needs to get as many former Patriots as possible. But I like Van Noy. You have Emmanuel Ogbah, who has been solid from Kansas City. You have Shaq Lawson, who is serviceable. He hasn't lived up to his former first-round pick in 2016, but he's still okay from Buffalo. So, again, a lot of question marks here. So I'm going to give this a 5. I like Van Noy, but it seems like a lot of other guys are kind of just like rotational guys. I'm not sure exactly how much faith I have in this edge group. Moving on to the interior defensive line, you have Devon Godchaux, who I really like him as a number 2 guy, and Christian Wilkins, who had a great rookie season. So I think that, again, defensive tackles typically don't play well to rookie seasons. The fact that he had a really good rookie season, very promising. Also drafted Raquan Davis in the 2nd round. And you have Zach Sealer, I believe is how you pronounce it, who only had 135 career snaps in 2 seasons, but he showed promise in one game against Cincinnati last year. Just felt like it was worth mentioning. I like the interior defensive line. They get an 8, but edge only gets a 5.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll say about the edge rushers here is that they have a bunch of guys who I feel like are going to be able to at least fill in and get some sacks throughout the year. They have a bunch of bodies to throw at you. Ogbah, Van Noy, Lawson, Curtis Weaver's another guy I liked coming out of Boise State for the draft. I think they have enough guys that they can throw enough bodies on you and, create some pressure. I don't think they have any stars or necessarily on this team as far as edge rushers or defensive linemen, but I think it's a good group overall. I think they're going to be able to generate enough pressure with that front.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you could be talking me into a higher score, but stays at 5 for now. And we'll go to the linebackers that aren't edge. You have Raekwon McMullen. Also, this really confused me that they have two guys named Raekwon, spelled Raekwon. I got confused for a second, thought they were the same person. I thought I screwed up my notes. But anyways, McMullen is okay, but he's bad in coverage. You also have Jerome Baker, who had a good rookie season, but was a disappointing in year two. He needs to be more consistent, especially in the run defense. I'm giving the linebacking grouping a 5 right here, and to finish it off with secondary, they went out, they paid Byron Jones, who, if I remember correctly, I think you also agreed with me that seems like a bit of an overpay, seems like a bit of an overrated player, but still very good. And the fact that they have him opposite Xavier Howard, I think is really good. And they drafted a player whose name I will not pronounce because I don't want to sound stupid, in the first round. Noah. They drafted Noah in the first round as another corner. And then for safeties, they have Eric Rowe, who wasn't great as a cornerback, but has played well as a strong safety. And that's what he's going that's what he's going to be playing, so that's nice. You also have Bobby McCain, who he's fine. He was moved from a slot cornerback to safety, and it seems like he played a lot better as a slot cornerback, but they kind of need a safety. They did draft Brandon Jones in the third round. I still like the secondary a lot, especially their corners, so they're going to get a 9 for secondary, bringing their total defense to a 6.8. I don't think I said their offense because we were too busy arguing about Stephon Gilmore and Devontae Parker. Offense got a 4.8, bringing their total team to 5.8.
Yeah, so I mean, so with linebackers, I'll start with this. I think Landon Roberts also plays a pretty big role. He's someone who knows this defensive set very well, and I think he's, the Patriots had a lot of good linebackers last year, so that's probably why he didn't get as many snaps. Plus, he was an emergency fullback for them. I think he's someone that can come in and fill a good role for them at the linebacker spot as well. The secondary, yes, I think it's overpaid completely, or I think Byron Jones is overpaid completely. But at the very least, you're thinking the secondary is going to be very good for the next few years, even if it is overpaid. Kind of like you said, because they have two at least good corners. I don't think Jones is an elite cornerback, but he's at least good. Is he? So I think that this is going to be a very good secondary with those two. And I think it could be, there's 3 good secondaries, I think, in this division. And I really see what the Dolphins are trying to do. It's very New England-esque. They're going to have a lot of bodies out there creating some pass rush. And they're going to have a good secondary. They're going to have good cornerbacks. They're going to make plays based on this team throwing bodies at the quarterback.
Yeah. I think I agree. I think that, again, this is another team where I feel like very similar to the Jets. Like, I could see a scenario where they make the playoffs. Like, I can definitely see that happening. I just have to, like, again, just playing the odds. I do think I agree. I'm not sure if I would go Jets or Dolphins. I think I would go along with you, Dolphins 3 and Jets 4. But I do think that this is a very difficult team. Like, this is a team that's very much a wild card and could end up being. Yep. I could see them being. I could see them winning 5 games. I could see them winning 10 games without a doubt.
I mean, I could see them winning 4 games. I could see them both winning 9 games. I'm not really sure I'm ready to call them a playoff team just because I think that the AFC got better. I think, we're going to go through our rankings here. I think that there's a lot of good teams in the AFC this season. That's probably why I have the Jets and Dolphins as potential first-round pick candidates. But yeah, I do think that these are both teams that I could see just going off the rails and they win 4 games, or I could see them each going 9-7, 10-6 because of that. Because I think that, like I said, I think the Dolphins have a good coach. I think that they have a defensive set where they're going to be able to do enough, and maybe they make enough plays on offense where that works out for them. It's kind of the same thing I feel about the Jets. Other than that, I don't think they have a good coach, which is why I had them below.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And then let's move on to the team that's going to finish second in the division. I already know what this is. Who do you have as your number 2 team?
The Buffalo Bills. I think that at their best, this could be the best defense in football. I think there's a very good chance it's the best defense in football. But the question, and I also really like their coach. I think McDermott's a top 10 coach in the league. The questions I do have is Josh Allen. Is Josh Allen going to be good enough? He hasn't beat the Patriots once in his career. And I think that he's at time. If you watch him on the right week, he looks awesome because he's so athletic and makes a bunch of plays. If you watch him on the wrong week, he's 10 of 26 for 110 yards and 2 picks. So I think that that's going to be the biggest question with the Bills. I think they have a complete roster other than, is this quarterback good enough to win you a lot of games? And he hasn't proven that he can beat New England, and I don't think he does it again this season. So I have the Bills at 2.
So this isn't a bet. You changed your mind. since we did because about a month ago you were saying the Patriots were going to finish second and the Bills were going to win.
Well, they got Cam Newton.
And they lost half their team.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know what? We'll do then. This has been a very I don't think we've disagreed this much on an episode yet. Okay, well, we'll get into the Bills. I think this is a crazy take from you, that somehow Cam Newton is all of a sudden the complete savior. But listen, I will give you a chance. I'll hear you out in our next segment. We'll start with the Bills for now. We'll start off with Sean McDermott, who I think that we both are big fans of. He gets a 7 right here. And again, it feels like he deserves better, but 7 also is a very good score for coach. For quarterback, Josh Allen. Many people call him the white Cam Newton. He gets a 3 right here. So 10 out of 20 for their 2 most important positions. And again, I know neither one of us, I think, are the biggest fans of Josh Allen. I do have to say, though, it's like, there are positives of Josh Allen. Like, you do have to bring up the running ability when talking about Josh Allen. You have to bring up how he does perform well in the fourth quarter. The fact that he hasn't beaten Cam Newton or hasn't beaten the Patriots, I think it's fair criticism. But I also think that, again, I think he's a lower tier starter at this point in his career. And I would like to see he improved a lot from year 1 to year 2. He's going to have to keep improving, though, if the Bills are going to have a real chance.
Yeah, so I think McDermott is up there with Zimmer and Belichick as, one of the best defensive coaches in football. I think he's obviously elite on that side, and they've also built an elite roster on that side that's helped him. I think he's a very good coach. But, I can't say this enough. So just going through this Josh Allen season last year, his best games last year were the Giants, the Bengals, the Dolphins, the Redskins, that weird Dallas game. And he had a quarterback rating of 102 against New England in week 16, but he was also 13 of 26 in that game, 208 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the second touchdown was a completely blown coverage by New England that the guy was wide open. And, if they don't complete that pass, it's another mediocre game for him. And he also had his worst games of the season last year against New England, Cleveland, who I think is an underrated defense, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. And also a bad game against the Jets to end the season. So is this a guy who can beat good teams? I think that's the biggest question that the Bills have. And I can't say it enough. The completion percentage, I think, is always going to look very, very bad for him. But is he going to be able to make enough plays to beat any of these good teams, which he hasn't really done yet?
I think that's fair. I think that I was looking at it while you were looking at it. I believe he had 6 games of a passer rating over 100 last year. All but the one against New England that you talked about were against bad teams. You have I think Dallas was the next best, and then but they didn't have a great defense last year. And then you have Miami, Washington, Miami again, and the Giants. But again, I do think that there are things he does well. I almost feel like I'd rather listen. If part of what makes you great is running the ball, go Lamar Jackson. Just become a running quarterback. Just make that a bigger part of your game. He runs the ball a decent amount. He had 500 rushing yards last year. I think just go all out. Have that be like his game. Have more designed runs. I don't have a problem with it, in my opinion.
I think that's an option they can go. Is he as good as Lamar Jackson at that aspect? No. That's going to be the thing. So is this a make or break season for him? That's my question.
It's hard to say. Again, I feel like he shows enough. I think that if he does what he did last year, they're going to hang on to him. I think that they like him. They like the intangibles, and I think I think part of it too is I think part of why Bills fans love him so much is just because he's a likable guy. And I know that's not necessarily logical to do, but I do it too sometimes with players where it's this move makes sense, but I don't want to see you go. Well, Jameis Winston, but just in general. But I think that's a good example too of Winston he was the prototypical I'm going to give you just enough to make you keep me for another season, have just enough good games. And I do feel like there is enough that I see, but I do think that I said it in the offseason. I think they should have brought in a veteran. They should have brought in Jameis Winston. They should have brought in somebody that if Josh Allen doesn't work out, they can have someone else back in. I think they should have done the Tannehill from to Mariota thing. And I think that's what they should have done. But again, we've talked plenty about Josh Allen. We can move on. We'll go on to the offensive line. You have Mitch Morse, who's a solid center. You also have Quentin Spain, who is okay. He's good in the pass, but sometimes does struggle in the run. And, he's a Guard, so that is important. You have Brian Winters, who was kind of a surprise cut from the Jets. He's decent. Starting guard, I think. You also have Dean Dawkins, who I like him. I think he's probably their best offensive lineman. And then you have Cody Ford, who was a second round pick in 2019. And I have in my notes, all I wrote was bad with like 7 A's.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
I was going to say, so the line gets a 5.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you hope that Ford gets better because obviously it was his rookie year last year, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a chance that he gets better and bounces back, and this becomes a very good O line. But I just feel like it's kind of average overall. I don't think it does anything that really moves the needle for me. But I think it's solid enough to get the job done.
Yeah, I agree. We don't spend too much on that. We'll go to wide receivers. This is headlined by 4th round pick Gabriel Davis from UCF, but they have some other talent on there with Stephon Diggs, John Brown, and Cole Beasley. I like this wide receiving group, especially with the addition of Stephon Diggs, kind of that number one I can beat man coverage. I do think that like he's. I'm not sure if I'm totally sold on him being like he's definitely not an elite, but he is a number one guy. So I'm going to give the wide receiving group a 7. And then for the backs, you have Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who was a 3rd round pick. I'm going to give the halfbacks 5 here.
Yeah, so I think, it makes a lot of sense what they're doing. Stephon Diggs is a very good vertical pass catching guy. He's one of the best deep ball targets, I think. Now, the question was a lot of that because he had Kyle Rudolph and Adam Thielen taking so much from him over the middle, or is it because he's that elite at that level of the game? So I think what's going to happen is you have him and John Brown, and they're essentially just going to bomb it. I think if we talked about Josh Allen, if there's one thing that he's good at, it's throwing the ball really far. He's always had the big arm, and that's what people have talked about as far as his skill set as a quarterback. Well, he's got 2 great deep options next to him. He's got John Brown and Stephon Diggs, who I think are 2 guys that are going to be really good for that setup. Now, is he going to be able to get him the ball enough consistently is the question. And then Devin Singletary has to be the weirdest player in football. I've never seen a guy who's not particularly strong and not particularly fast just end up being a good football player, but that's essentially what he is. And he's just a solid running back overall. And I really like Zach Moss too. He was, the guy for that Utah offense last year. And I think he's going to be a very good running back in the NFL also. So I think it's a solid running back group overall.
Yeah. I guess again, we have a disagreement, and that is that I do not think Josh Allen is a good deep ball thrower. I actually think that's probably the worst aspect of his game. Sure, he can throw the ball deep, but he can't throw it accurate. And I would honestly rather him take that out.
Well, he's not accurate. He's not accurate at anything. So
but he's way more. Well, in that case, just get rid of him. I mean, if you can't make a completion forever, I mean, I don't care if you can throw the ball deep if it's going to be an interception. The windows, you have to be more accurate on those deep balls if you want to be successful. And I think I actually don't totally agree. I think that on short routes he can be pretty accurate. I think a lot of his accuracy problems. I don't think he's like super accurate, but I think that it's his biggest missed throws are down the field.
Yeah, I just think that it just seems like when you have a guy like Brown and Diggs, that's what you want to do, right? That's you're going to send those guys vertical. They have a good guy over the middle too, in Cole Beasley, who's going to be able to find a lot of those pockets of space and make some plays. But it just seems like if you're going to have a guy like Diggs and Brown, and is he accurate? No, but I mean, he's going to be able to throw the ball far. You're hoping that these high level receivers for deep ball plays are going to be able to just get under the ball and make some plays for him.
Yeah. And also for tight ends, Dawson Knox, 3rd rounder in 2019. Good blocker, inconsistent, but tons of potential. I'm not sure how much content you have for Dawson Knox, but he gets a 6. Tight ends get a 6. Overall offense, just a 5.2, brought down a lot by mediocre offensive line and halfback room, and then Josh Allen. But not a complete mess, but definitely one of the lower offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely isn't the strength of the team. We're going to talk about that next. But I guess, the question is going to be what's the ceiling of this team when they have an offense that just is kind of average overall. They obviously have good receivers, but how good can the rest of the offense be and how good can they make their defense? That's going to be the biggest question.
Yeah, ends up being the 25th best offense. We'll get on to that defense. We'll start off with the edge rushers. You have Mario Addison, who was a 32-year-old from Carolina. He's been a pretty consistent 10 sack guy for them, around that range for Carolina. He has 55 career sacks. So he should, be a good veteran leader who can still perform. You have Trent Murphy, who I think he's a really good run defender. The pass rusher, he's almost got like that Clowney bug to a lesser degree where he's good, but he sometimes struggles with finishing. You also have Jerry Hughes, who is 32. And I think he's better than his statistics show. And along with that, second round pick, AJ Espinenza. A lot of guys who can perform here and a lot of guys who can perform very well. Again, I don't know if they have that one guy who, like, on a third down, you trust that's going to beat a tackle and, you're going to get pressure immediately. But I'm still going to give this edge group an 8.
Yeah, I think overall it's a good group. I think it's very similar to Miami, I think, in a lot of ways, where they have 3 or 4 bodies that they can kind of throw at you and just create a bunch of pressure. But I'm with you. I don't think there's any really elite guy in this group, but it's enough guys to get enough pressure and, give their secondary time to make some plays, which is they're very good at.
Yeah. We'll move on to the interior defensive line. This is probably the worst part of their defense, but it's not a mess. You have Vernon Butler, who had 6 sacks last year and has tons of potential, but hasn't really put it all together through 4 years from Carolina. Again, a lot of guys are from Carolina. In general, but I mean for the Bills. You also have Ed Oliver, who again, he showed some flashes, but I thought he had kind of a disappointing rookie year. But again, interior defensive line, as we've talked about, don't always have the best rookie seasons. I'm going to give this interior defensive line a 5. I think it has potential to be better or worse. I'm also going to talk about the linebackers. You have Matt Milano, who I think is a great number 2 to Edmonds, and you have Terrell Edmonds, who is a great number 1 to Milano. I think that these are really good 1-2 punch. And you also have AJ Klein, who I think is a good run stopper. Not too much to complain about here for the linebackers. I'm giving them a 10 out of 10 here. So 5 for interior D-line, 10 for linebackers that aren't edge.
Yeah, I mean, Edmonds is an elite guy, I think, in this group, and that's a big thing. Losing Star Latulele hurts. That's the big thing for the interior defensive line is him opting out of the season. I think he's a fantastic defensive tackle, and losing a guy like him, I think, is going to hurt a lot. But I think, Ed Oliver is a guy who, he's been talked about since high school as being a future star at defensive tackle in the league. Does he put it together and make that kind of impact? I think it's possible. We'll see what happens. I think he has a better second season.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I loved him out of college. I wanted the Bucs to get him. I'm kind of glad we didn't now, but I still have a lot of faith in him. But we'll finish it off with the secondary. Definitely Buffalo seems very happy Tre'Davious White decided to continue playing, because that would have been a huge blow had he not. He's, if we're doing the individual player rankings, I think I do put Gilmore number 1. So all of that quote unquote slander in the beginning, I think he's the best player in this division. I think White might be number 2. You also have Levi Wallace, who I think he's a solid starter. He won't blow you away, but and he did have a few bad games last year, but I would still say he's solid. They added Josh Norman. Why, I don't know, but they did add him. I'm interested to see if he can maybe he still has something left in the tank, or maybe could just somehow be like a veteran leader to some of these guys. I don't know. But I guess worth taking a flyer. They also have one of the best safety duos in the NFL with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. So I'm going to give the secondary an 8. I'm a little concerned about their 2 and 3 cornerback position, but I still really like the secondary.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about a few teams before like this as it's kind of 3 elite guys and then one guy you're like, I don't know. If having those 3 elite guys obviously makes it probably an automatic 8 or 9, but are they going to be good enough to blanket, especially when it comes to big games, playoff games? A lot of people are going to be looking at, okay, let's get Levi Wallace in bad coverage situations, and he's probably going to lose those ones. So is the other guys in that secondary going to be enough to make up for the fact that Wallace is probably the weakest link in the group? I think that's the biggest problem, and we'll see what happens. I'm probably a little bit higher that maybe they can make the Josh Norman thing work, especially he's not going to be asked to do a whole lot. Can he be good enough to be a number 2 guy next to those 3 guys who are so good? Possibly, but, we haven't seen good Josh Norman in a lot of years, so I'm not holding any breath for it.
Well, here's how they would make Josh Norman work: is play a lot of cover 3 zone, have him out there on cover 3 where he thrived in Carolina, have him be that zone corner where he has had success before. Maybe they feel like he can do that. I don't know. Although it's not really what Buffalo does too much. They play a lot of man. But anyways, defense gets an 8.3, which has them tied with the Saints for fourth best defense in the NFL. So a top 5 defense, which feels about right. Very good defense. But with their offense, they only end up with a 6.6 total score. This puts them at 17th best overall, which is still, in terms of the score, the best score that someone in this division got. So again, like I said, I think a lot of these teams, their scores don't really. I think they're better than what their score says. But I still think that this is maybe not the best division. But I think the Bills could definitely. They're my pick to win it now, and I've done a 180 after all of the Patriots opt-outs.
Yeah, so I guess we're getting into it here. I think the Patriots are still going to win the division. I still think that they're the class of the group because they have the best coach in football, who I think is going to make a lot of things work. They have a quarterback who I can, I trust that he's going to be able to be a good quarterback in the league. I think that the receiving core can do nothing but get better. I think that they bring in a lot of pass catching options at tight end. Obviously, it's first year tight end, so who knows? I think the offensive line has a good season. I think that there's a lot of ways that this offense can be very good and very dynamic. Obviously, the opt-outs that they've had, they were affected more than anyone in the opt-out situation. Because they lost so many guys. But there's one guy that I'm really concerned about New England losing. And then the rest, we can get in debate about it. But the rest, I feel fairly confident, are guys that, it's the Patriot way. It's next man up. It's do your job. That's how they do it. And I feel like that there's enough guys coming up in place that can make enough plays for this team. Outside of one guy who I think is a big problem, but we'll talk about it. But I had the Patriots going at 1 because they have the best coach. I think the offense is going to be better because I think people are going to be healthy at receiver. I think Cam Newton is going to be healthy. It looks solid out of training camp. I think it could be a very good team this next year. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender, but I think they're good enough to win the division.
Yeah. So here's my thing about the Patriots. There is so many spots on this team. There was a point when I was doing this where I started laughing because I'm like, how am I supposed to evaluate these guys? We've got a bunch of there's so many guys. I'm just like, I don't know who you are. Like, I'm doing so much. I didn't have to do any more. I had to do so much research for this team. There was at least like 5 or 6 guys I just had never heard of before on this team. So they're a very bizarre team. I'm not going to count them out. Like, I'm never going to count the Patriots out. They definitely will be contending for a playoff spot, at least. Like, that's, I think, worst case scenario. I'm never going to be one that says the Patriots have no chance. I just think they have a less high of a chance as Buffalo. But let's start off with the 2 most notable ones. Bill Belichick. This is an easy 10. Don't even have to think about it. And then Cam Newton. I considered bumping an extra point up from Stidham and Hoyer. I'm not going to do that. Cam Newton gets a 5. It's the same grade I gave Ben Roethlisberger. I feel like that was fair. They're kind of similar. Compared them very similarly. So that's what they get. And also, I'll move on to the offensive line because we're talking about opt-outs. I think Marcus Cannon, I'm not sure who your pick was for the biggest opt-out to worry about. I think Marcus Cannon is a huge one. Not so much because of him, but I'm not sure who they have behind him. So you have, for the rest of their line, it's David Andrews, Joe Thuney, Shaq Mason, and even Isaiah Wynn, I think, has looked good when healthy. He obviously only played little over 500 snaps in 2 years, but when he is healthy, I think he's looked solid. But it looks like now their starting tackle looks like it's going to be Corey Cunningham. I'm not sure how much faith you have in him. I do not have a ton of faith in him. So unless you think this is going to be like a Trent Brown situation where someone that has shown nothing all of a sudden becomes great, I think this could be a real problem of their starting right tackle no longer being there. So I'm going to give the line a 7, but I think it's a big. So I still have the line as a 7, but I think that definitely hurts them a lot.
So, all right, let's go through the 3 things here. I have points on all 3 of these. Bill Belichick. So we've had this hypothetical scenario a couple times. We did it with Mahomes, and we also did it with Freddie Kitchens, my favorite coach who's no longer a head coach, unfortunately. Where would you put Bill Belichick above a 10 to rate him? Like, personally, I have Andy Reid at number 2. So what would you rank Bill Belichick to have him above Andy Reid?
Geez, so if Reid stays at a 10, but I'm just adjusting Bill Belichick.
To show his value above the next highest guy, yes.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, again, it's kind of a tough question, honestly, because, am I trying to do this to actually fit the system? My grading system is already flawed. So let's do in general. I mean, I don't know, like 20. Like you want to go like you go high. Like I at first I was thinking like isn't in the 30s. Like I think that like he's so good. I mean he's again
Yeah.
part of his value is his being a GM. It's all tied in, but like he's the reason why I think that he could legitimately take a team that I don't think is super talented, and he's why I'm like yeah, playoffs seems about they'll contend for playoffs like because he is so good. I just think he's definitely the best I've ever seen, and you can't count him out. He has and he's still got it. I mean, look at what he did in the playoff run where they beat the Rams most recently. Like, I mean, what he did game after game was just like a thing of beauty to watch. It's kind of why I'm glad I'm not a Patriots hater, because I've been able to actually enjoy what he's been able to do. I don't know how people are Patriots haters. I mean, like I like the SFU, but like as a whole, I've always liked Bill Belichick. I've always liked Tom Brady. And I don't know. I think it's yeah, he's ridiculous. He's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say 15. You have him at 20 or 30 is even better. I just think he's that much better. And one of the things, too, I think is getting overlooked. The Patriots were one of the best. I mean, they've always been one of the best teams in the league this century. But the way he prepared his team after the lockout and essentially simplifying a lot of things and not trying to throw too much on his defense. We had a very good post-lockout season. I forget how many years ago that was. And if there's anybody who's going to be prepared post-pandemic football season, it's going to be Bill Belichick. So I have more than enough that he's going to be by far the best coach in the AFC East again. And I think that this is what separates them from the rest of the league still. Having a guy like Belichick who is not only going to be prepared with the pandemic, but also kind of in FU mode because people are saying, well, he's not going to be able to do it without Tom Brady. I think that this is just going to be an insane season for him. I think he could win Coach of the Year. He's always a candidate, but I think it's a very real thing that if they win the division, it's because of Belichick.
Yeah.
Going to quarterback.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say going to quarterback. I'm not really sure. I think there's a lot of people in New England, in Boston area, that are trying to make this a quarterback competition. It's not a quarterback competition. There's a debate is if Cam Newton's healthy, he's starting this team. And, I can go into the whole history of Boston. Boston fans.
You don't have to go to whole. We don't have to do the whole history of Boston. We're all right.
Boston fans, just be better. This is the only thing I'm going to say about this. A black quarterback starting for the New England Patriots is not the worst thing to happen in the world. Cam Newton's the most talented option to win us football games. Let's just move on from that. So the offensive line. I actually thought Marcus Cannon was the worst offensive lineman on the team last season, as far as starters go. I thought Ted Karras, besides having the slowest shotgun snap in human history, was a very good center. And now we upgraded center because David Andrews is back, who I think is an elite center. I think the one thing that happens with Marcus Cannon is that Isaiah Wynn can't get hurt. And that's a big F because he's always hurt. But I think that if he's healthy and stays the whole season, I still think that this is going to be a very good offensive line, especially because Marshall, we were still a good offensive line last year, and that was with Marshall Newhouse, who was one of the worst left tackles I've ever seen. And we still filled in just fine. I think we're going to be fine without Cannon. I actually think that Yoni Kajuste, I think I said that right, is going to end up starting. He was a third round pick last year, who a lot of people were really high on as a third round pick. And he got hurt and missed the entire season. I think he's a guy that could fill in at right tackle and be pretty solid. But obviously we haven't seen him play, so that's a big if. But I think that this is the team that can weather that blow and be fine.
Yeah. Well, and here's the crazy thing about the Patriots. I mean, we're taking a long time, and I think it's fine. I mean, this is easily going to be the longest podcast we've done so far. But I think that, like, here's the thing about the Patriots. Like, you say all that stuff, and, like, if I was saying that about Tampa Bay, you'd be like, what are you talking about? You're clearly looking for excuses. But with New England, I think it's actually fair because of how well Belichick does find these nobodies and make them stars. I do think this is all fair. But, again, I'm trying to not take that into consideration on my grading scale, but I am putting an asterisk next to my grading scale and saying, listen, it is the Patriots. They find ways to do stuff. We'll move on to the wide receivers. You got Edelman, Mohamed Sanu, N'Keal Harry. All three guys I think are getting slept on a little bit. But again, it's a lot of potential. And I don't love when you're just hoping for potential. I like sure things. I'm giving the wide receiving room a 4, and also for the backs. You have Sony Michel, who I think I'm still higher on than you are, but I think definitely not as promising as he was when he was a big part of their Super Bowl winning team in his rookie year. You also had Excuse me. You also have James White, Rex Burkhead, and Damian Harris. So I like that at college. I'm kind of just disappointed he didn't do. Was he hurt last year, or was he? I remember not really.
We're just deep at running back. He couldn't get snaps.
Gotcha. But anyways, yeah. So 5 for backs. I would like to see more from Harris, and then 4 for wide receivers. What do you think about that?
So I think that's fair. I think the wide receivers is a big prove-it opportunity. Edelman, I thought, was good last year, battling a lot of injuries, which I thought was a big problem with him and getting separation. N'Keal Harry, I'm willing to watch his rookie season because I think a wide receiver missing training camp is a huge problem because you can't work into the offense at all. Mm-hmm. He missed a lot of training camp and he also missed the first half of the season. So I'm willing to give that a wash and say I think potentially he can be a very good receiver. He still has a lot of things I really like about him. Mohamed Sanu also was battling injuries, and I think he can be a good receiver. And then the last 2 guys, I think, Patriots always build depth. I think Jacoby Myers is a guy who was very good last year in a very limited role. He obviously was, the preseason star, but it's preseason. I think he can fill in a very good role as that slot guy. And I'll be honest, I don't know enough about Damiere Byrd, but it was telling to me that a lot of people in Arizona, when he left to New England, were really high on his game, even though he was kind of a depth player for them as well. He could be a guy that fills in pretty well for New England as well. But we'll see. I don't know enough about him, but Arizona fans were really high on him, even as a depth guy, I thought.
So 4 seem fair for you for that position then?
I think it's fair. I think it's a lot of prove it for a lot of these guys. I think if they're healthy, I think the ceiling for this group could be a 6 or a 7, especially if Harry, lives to some of his potential. And then as far as running back goes, Sony Michel can't break a tackle, but that's besides the point. The big thing is that he's missing week 1, it sounds like, and he's one of the guys, he's had knee injury, foot injury, knee injury, foot injury, and he's out for foot surgery right now, and that's why it seems like he's going to miss week 1. I just am worried about the long-term health for him. James White is obviously an elite pass catching back. He's one of the best at that. And Rex Burkhead is a guy who comes in and gets a good amount of yards every time it seems like he gets touches. He's a good number 3. The biggest questions are going to be, could Lamar Miller maybe fill in week 1, who is someone they signed? And then Damian Harris, I think, is another guy who I think I'm pretty high on. But, Bill Belichick likes that 4th running back guy to be a special teams guy. That's why Brandon Bolden got a lot more touches than him. And Bolden was good last year before. I think he's on Miami now.
Wait, am I thinking something else? I thought he opted out.
Oh yeah, sorry. He did opt out. My bad. Mm-hmm. He signed with Miami before and came back. My bad. Okay, yeah, he did opt out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he was a good special teams guy. I think Harris is the guy who could prove himself. I think he's really good between the tackles. We'll see if he gets some opportunities. I am a guy who is also high on him, but 5 is also fair for this group. I think the depth of this group is the strength.
Yeah, I do agree. For tight ends, this is a little bit tough. Looks like the 2 biggest names are going to be 2 third-round rookies. I'm not sure how confident you feel in this tight end group, and I'll give the floor to you because obviously you're the Patriots guy. I'm giving this tight end group a 2. I don't have too much confidence in it.
I think that's fair. I think this is a group in 2 to 3 years can be pretty good because I think we've talked about it multiple times. Rookie tight ends struggle. I think the one thing that could happen is that I think Devin Asiasi is another big-time high school recruit, didn't really work out at Michigan, went to UCLA, proved it really well his last season with a guy in Dorian Thompson-Robinson who wasn't a very good quarterback. But I think that he's a guy who's going to split out wide a lot from that tight end position and be put in a lot of pass catching situations because he's a guy I think who it seems like he tries in blocking but struggles in blocking. And I think Dalton Keene, because one of the other big losses was Danny Vitale, but I think Dalton Keene is going to be kind of using that H-back fullback role because he is a solid blocker. He's a bit undersized, but I think he's going to be using that role. I think Devin Asiasi could have a good year pass catching, but I don't think he's going to be asked to do a lot blocking, which leaves us with Ryan Izzo, who isn't very good. He was one of the worst tight ends I thought in the league last year. He just doesn't do a lot for me. I thought that was the biggest thing that New England lost last season because when they had Devlin and when they had Gronkowski, it was almost like 7 offensive linemen out there with how good those guys were blocking. And Ryan Izzo just isn't a very good blocker for me and an even worse receiver.
Yeah, no, I'm with you all the way there. So that gives their offense not a very good score, 4.6. Again, a lot of it is these are not weighted. So if it was, having a good offensive line would matter a lot more. But that being said, ends up being the 28th offense according to this system. Only teams they beat out were the Bengals, Jaguars, the football team, and Chicago. So not the best, but again, I think it could actually be better than the score says.
Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily worried about having, bad tight ends, because I think that there's a lot of pieces on this offense that can be very good. I think the offensive line, like I said, is still going to be very good. I think Cam's going to be able to make plays if he's healthy, or I think he is going to be healthy. Everything out of training camp says he looks pretty good. And I think the receivers are going to bounce back to where I think this offense is it's not going to be a bottom 4 offense in the league. I'd say it'd be probably mid-tier if I were to guess. I think it can be a good offensive group. But yeah, obviously the rating system is going to have, if you have a 2 in a position group, it's not going to look good for the rest of the team.
Exactly. And then, so we'll move on to the defense now. Defense, definitely the better spot. So we'll start off with edge. I think Chase Winovich is the most interesting one. I really liked him out of college. Actually, fun fact about Chase Winovich, out of all of the good rookie edge rushers last year, the player who had the most sacks per snap, so if you take how many times you were out there into consideration, he had the most sacks per snap out of any of the rookie edge rushers. He also didn't beat a tackle one-on-one once the entire season. But, it was a lot of him being a role player, him doing his role well, but at the same time, a very good role player who can find a way to get sacks, even if it's not through just straight up beating a tackle. There's still a lot of value there. So I'm interested to see what he'll do year 2. You have John Simon, who I think is a good rotational guy. A couple of rookies. You have second and third rounder here for the edge. Again, you can probably speak to this better than I can. I always say I know my goal is to know more than 31, no more than you about 31 teams, just you being anyone listening, because I'm not going to know more than your own team. But hopefully I can get most of it. What do you, I'm going to give the edge a 5. What do you feel about the edge?
I think that's fair. I think that this is the biggest question mark for the team as far as edge rushers and linebackers with that 3-4 defense, because they lost so many guys. Obviously, having a guy like Kyle Van Noy, guys like Dante Hightower, and guys like Jamie Collins really helped. And now you have a bunch of backups essentially trying to fill those roles and fill them admirably. But that's going to be the biggest question mark for me. I think Winovich can be a good player. Obviously, he is very young and now is being asked to be the premier pass rusher for the team. So I think that's a big question mark for them. I do think that the strength of this defensive line group is the interior defensive line. And I think that's where they're going to be very good and try and make some space for those guys to get some pressure.
Yeah, well, let's get into the interior defensive line. You have Lawrence Guy, who I think is really good. I think that's a really good player. You also they added Bo Allen, who, again, I watched closely in Tampa Bay. Kind of forgettable. You probably won't notice him much on the field. But again, New England, they have this crazy tendency to find players that, haven't really done much and then do good. Bo Allen also did play well for Philadelphia. You have Dietrich Wise, who I think is a rotational guy, and Adam Butler, who I think is fine, but I don't think he's quite as good as his 6 sacks last year would have you believe. I'm only giving this interior D-line a 6. Seems like you're higher on them than I am. Explain to me why.
I'm just higher on Adam Butler, I think, than you are. I think he's a guy who's young and has a lot of talent. I saw that, his he didn't grade out very well for Pro Football Focus, but I think he's a guy who just makes an impact on that defensive line. I think he can make a lot of plays, and obviously the 6 sacks kind of back that up. I think he's a guy who can really elevate his game. I think going forward, he's going to really develop into a really good player. I'm a lot higher on Adam Butler, and I think he can develop into a high-level player on that team, so that's probably why I have them a little higher than you.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, we just disagree there. I'm also a little bit interested about linebackers that aren't edge, because you said you think the edge group is the biggest question mark. Am I missing something with the linebackers that aren't edge then? Because looks like you have Bentley, who he only had 432 snaps in 2 seasons, and not because he was injured. He did look solid though, and I'm interested to see what he can do as a starter. You also have Brandon Copeland, who I feel is mostly just a special teams guy from New York. They have a 6th-round pick. I don't know. Am I missing somebody? Did I forget about something? Like Hightower's gone. So what do you have?
this is the losing Hightower, I think, is the biggest thing for the opt-outs. New England does a lot of different things defensively, as far as they move a lot of guys around, because there's a lot of plays where Hightower is also coming off the edge and he's also playing in the middle.
Right.
But I just think that him losing a guy like him in the defense, Bill Belichick doesn't pay a lot of players, but it's very telling who he pays. He pays guys like Gilmore, he pays guys like Devin McCourty, and he pays guys like Hightower. Hightower is that guy in the middle who makes a lot of the calls for the defense, and I think losing him is going to be a big thing. I kind of, because he does so much as far as rushing the passer and also in the middle, I kind of put these two groups together. But I do think Jawan Bentley can be very good. His rookie season, he looked really good in a limited role. His rookie season, he did look good when he needed to play, and then he got hurt and missed the season, or missed the rest of the season. And then last year, we got Jamie Collins, and he was just behind four guys that I thought were really good. I think he's a starting level player as far as a run defender. He's got to get better. He still looks big and clunky a lot in terms of pass coverage, especially when he's defending running backs. They can kind of make him look like a fool. But I think as far as run coverage, I think he can be very good. And he's kind of stuck in this leadership role in the defense. I'm with you. I think both of these groups, as far as edge rusher and linebacker, are the biggest question. I think Bentley can't. If I'm going to bet on which guy I think is going to be better next year, I'm going to bet on Bentley being better than Winovich, just because I thought a lot of Winovich's totals last year were because there were so many good players around him. Like you said, he didn't beat a single tackle last season. I think that's very telling to his actual pass rushing ability. I think Bentley can be a very good player at the linebacker spot.
Yeah. Also, I know we both mean this, but just someone in the comments, like, he beat tackles, he just didn't beat them and get a sack out of it. But yeah,
yes.
Just a bit. I know that's what we both mean, but someone in the comments won't get it. So I gave the linebacking group a 1 because maybe Bentley will show something, but I feel like it's a big risk, and I still don't even know who the number 2 guy is. But that's what I gave. Again, I'm not sure if you think that's too low, but I think that seems fair to me, because I think Hightower really hurts.
Yeah, I do think that's the biggest piece that they lost.
Mm-hmm.
He was so important for that defense. I'm willing to say that Bentley is going to be able to fill in and be admirable, but I do think that this is the between them, the 4 linebackers are going to be the toughest problem with New England this next season. But I still think it's going to be a very good defense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the main reason why it would be a good defense is because of the secondary. Listen, I've said some mean things about Gilmore. I don't think he deserved the Defensive Player of the Year, but that's largely because I don't think a cornerback deserves Defensive Player of the Year unless they do something exceptional. And I think he was simply just the best cornerback in the league last year. I did bring up the Devontae Parker game. I do feel like that's a fair criticism. He turned into Marcus Peters in that game, where he was going for interceptions early on. Again, I made a video about it, where there was a clear play when he went for an interception and got burned for a 30-yard completion to Parker. I do think it's fair to bring that up. I also think it's fair to say that's not going to happen. Again, he learned his lesson. When I do watch Gilmore, there are like the game when I watched, if anyone who has NFL Game Pass, watch him against Cincinnati. Watch that tape, because I was just watching that and I'm like, this guy's a Hall of Famer. Like, he just has so many plays where you're like, he's a Hall of Famer. Just because I don't think he should have won Defensive Player of the Year, it's simply positional bias. I think he's tremendous. They also have J.C. Jackson and Jason McCourty for the corners. You have Devin McCourty for the safeties. The second safety is obviously up for debate. About an hour and 40 minutes ago, we talked about potentially, could they add Earl Thomas? They have Adrian Phillips, who I actually even have in my notes, should be the replacement for Harmon as third corner, or as number 5 guy, like you talked about. And then they also have Kyle Duggar in the second round, who I like. I think he's pretty decent. Again, one of the best secondaries in the league. If it's not best, it's second best. It gets a 10 for me. Bringing their overall defense to just 5.5, but that's because of the linebackers. Again, like I said, this clearly is a clear example of why my grading system is flawed, because they have some clear flaws on their roster, but they clearly have a plan to make the linebackers probably not that important. Their secondary, very important. So while this defense only ends up getting a 5.5, if I was weighting it, it'd be like a 9.5.
Yeah, I think, Gilmore's the most important player of this defense, because a lot of it revolves on him essentially defending one guy and taking that guy out of the game. And that's what Belichick likes to do. He likes to take away your best option and make you go to options 2, 3, and 4 when you don't want to. And Gilmore's the best at doing that with essentially one guy. You could talk, obviously the low is he doesn't beat the one guy and Devontae Parker goes off, but there was also 15 games where he dominated the number one guy and a lot of teams had to go to their number 2 guy. And, you mentioned the Cincinnati game. I think the one game to watch too was to go back and watch that Dallas game and how, that was, by a lot of statistical ratings, one of the best offenses in football. And they shut them down because Amari Cooper was a 0. He couldn't do anything against Gilmore, and that's a big reason why. I think that this is a really elite group. Obviously, Devin McCourty is still very good. Jason McCourty is a solid number 2. J.C. Jackson, the stats look fantastic on him. Next Gen had him as the second best cover corner in the league last year, and Pro Football Focus actually did this whole statistic on passer rating allowed, and J.C. Jackson was ranked first in the league. He had a 37 passer rating against. He's a fantastic number 3 corner, but a lot of those numbers are skewed because he's defending number 3 guys. So I'm not going to say he's the best corner in the league or a top 5 corner in the league, but he's a fantastic number 3 guy. I think that this group is just, not only is it super talented on the front, but guys like J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones are very good depth players and, I think could start on a lot of teams in the league. I think Kyle Duggar is a guy who's a great athlete who I'm not sure he's going to be ready to take on the Pat Chung role, but could. I think he's going to be very good in the next couple of years, but I think he's going to fill in a role. Terrence Brooks is another guy who I think if Adrian Phillips has to step up and be that number 2 guy, I think he can for 16 games. And I think Terrence Brooks is a guy who at least can step up and be that number 3 guy and be solid enough. I think this is still this secondary group is 8 deep. And I think that's more depth than any other secondary group in the league.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do agree. It's such a deep secondary. It's definitely, again, it's them or Seattle. I said Seattle. If you want to say, I wouldn't. But I don't think that there's a big gap between the two, and I could easily be talking to New England as well. I think that my thing with this team is that I feel like if they're going to win a Super Bowl, it's going to be because Bill Belichick has the greatest coaching year of his career. I think that they have clear flaws now in their roster. I like their secondary a lot, but as we've seen, I mean, are they going to be able to beat Baltimore in the playoffs when the secondary doesn't matter as much? I don't know. Are they going to be able to beat some of these other running teams? I don't know. Is their offense going to be able to outscore teams, and are they going to be losing games 13-10? There is a possibility of that. I do think that there are some good things about the Patriots, but they are maybe the biggest wild card. I think I said the Texans are the biggest wild card. They are not. The Patriots are the biggest wild card. This is a team that I could see going 7-9. This is a team that I could see winning the Super Bowl. I think there is such variance in this team. And because of that variance, I have Buffalo slightly ahead. But honestly, I don't feel too confident about either of these two teams' long-term championship chances. But let's just use that as a segue to our final segment of this podcast. We've, again, marathon podcast here, but you know what? It's been fun, I think. Let's just get into what we're going to do is we're going to basically talk about everything that's going to happen in the playoffs. We're going to give our predictions for who's going to win certain awards, like Coach of the Year, MVP, things of that nature. We're going to predict who's going to make the playoffs, who's going to win each playoff game, and eventually who is going to win the Super Bowl. Let's start off with the awards, and then we'll do the NFC, and then we'll do the AFC, and we'll do the awards first. Then I'll do the NFC. I'll do the NFC. You do the NFC. I do the AFC. You do the AFC, and then we do Super Bowl.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So, and I also did. I'm not sure if you did this. I did candidates as well. So I did 3 candidates for each award as well. I just did it because it was honestly easier. But I'll start off with Coach of the Year. My 2 runner-ups are, I think, Vic Fangio. I think that he's going to end up being a candidate. And again, keep in mind, the Coach of the Year is always narrative. This is the biggest narrative award that the NFL does. So I think that Vic Fangio, I think John Gruden also, those are 2 guys that their teams are going to be a lot better than people realize, like people expect them to be, I think. And then I do have the Coach of the Year. I have it going to Bill Belichick. I think he has the best chance of winning it. I think if the Patriots just make the playoffs, because there's so little names, he's going to end up winning it. And I think they would like to give it to him. I just think he hasn't had the narrative. Now that he has a narrative, I think it's going to be Bill Belichick. So that's who I have for Coach of the Year. Who do you have?
So we are going to agree on this one. We have Belichick. I have candidates for all of these as well, and I'm with you. It's a lot of it is narrative based. So I think that a lot of it is going to be teams who didn't make the playoffs last year who do make the playoffs. So my candidates are probably exceed a lot of people's expectations. My three candidates outside of him were Mike Tomlin, Bruce Arians, and Frank Reich, which probably tells you a lot of, it's telling towards my playoff predictions. But yeah, so I have Frank Reich, Bruce Arians, and Mike Tomlin as guys who can win. But, going away from that narrative is if I'm doubling down on Patriots winning the division, then Bill Belichick's the coach of the year, I think. If he wins 11 games with this team, then I think that it's very telling of how dominant he is as a head coach and how much better he is than everybody else.
Yeah, well, I also should be clear, like I say, I'm just picking who I think has the best chance of winning. So, I think Bill Belichick has a great chance of winning. I also don't think the Patriots have the best chance of winning their division. So, it might seem inconsistent, but it's just I'm doing it percentage-wise. We'll go to the biggest award, MVP. Lamar won it last year. I think that the three guys that I feel very confident will be in the running will be Lamar again, Mahomes again, and Russell Wilson. I think that they want to give it to Wilson so bad. If it's close, Wilson's going to get the tiebreaker, but I'm still going to go Lamar Jackson. And here's why. Because I think that the award, the writers and the people that vote on these things, they love records. They love when someone breaks records. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to break rushing records for Jackson than it is to break passing records for Mahomes or Wilson. I think that's going to give him an edge. And unlike basketball, they will give it to the best player. It's not just a straight up narrative thing. Their narrative plays a role, but it's not as big of a deal as it is in other sports. I'm going to go Lamar here.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's fair. He just won MVP, so I can't fault it. I actually had 6 candidates that I wrote down as I was just brainstorming ideas.
That's good. Yeah, I like it.
So I have Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers. So let's go through all of these. Wilson,
Not
think. No, so I had Wentz over Dak.
Were you afraid of getting made fun of?
Yeah, well, I had Wentz over Dak because I think Wentz, because of the options that he has at receiver and all that, I think Wentz needs to play at an MVP level for the Eagles to win the division, where I don't really think Dak necessarily needs to play at an MVP level for the Cowboys to win the division. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I think that he's also a guy who could make that leap. If you're looking at arm talent, we've talked about this before, Wentz might be 1 or 2 just based on pure arm talent. Now, the questions with him have always been health. I think with that good offensive line, I think he can make a huge difference for Philly. I ended up picking Wilson because of that narrative. I think that they want to make Wilson the guy, and I also think that the Seahawks are going to be very good this season. So I'm going to go with Wilson. I had a couple other guys. Watson I think he's going to be very good, and I think he's another guy like Wentz who I think needs to play at an MVP level for his team to make the playoffs. We'll get into that further down. I think he needs to play at that level. Mahomes and Lamar, I think, are always, 2 people you should pencil in as potential for the award because they're the best 2 players in football, probably, especially at quarterback. And then the last one I had was Rodgers, which might be a shock because he has, you probably say he has regressed over the last couple of seasons. But couldn't you just see him have a big FU kind of season where, they draft a quarterback rather than a receiver that he wants, and he just goes nuts because he's pissed off at everyone, including his own team, and just goes nuts and has that kind of season where he wins the award and the Packers go 13-3 again? I mean, that's the scenario I see for Rodgers.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be able to get the statistics to do it, but yeah, fair enough. And again, we can sort of plow through these a little bit. We'll go on to Offensive Player of the Year. I'm going to go, I have 2 runner-ups, Nick Chubb, and could be considered a homer pick. I'm going Mike Evans here, but I actually think that Evans, when he gets more attention with 5 primetime games, people are just going to notice him more, and he might kind of have that, oh, wow, look at how good he's been, even though he just does what he does. He might get the more attention and get some added looks that way. But I think the fair bet is Christian McCaffrey. Also, complete unrelated note, have you been keeping up with the Clippers-Mavericks game at all?
I haven't been keeping up with it. I've been on this, but
I'll let you know what happened. Want me to let you know what happened?
Yeah, go for it.
the Mavericks came back, beat the Clippers in overtime, series tied 2-2.
Yeah, I texted my friend the other day, how fun is the Houston Dallas conference finals going to be? But with Luka battling injuries and Kristaps not playing today, we'll see. I'm obviously a big Mavericks fan because of Luka, but we'll see. That's a great win though. But
anyways, sorry, just saw that. Figured I should let you know. Who do you have winning offensive player of the year?
So my candidates were, I actually put Godwin/Evans.
Gotcha. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're going to take enough catches away from the other that it kind of washes each other. Derrick Henry is a candidate, but I think, as I talked about in the AFC South podcast, I think Tennessee regresses. So then my last two candidates that I consider were McCaffrey and Elliott. I think Ezekiel Elliott could have a big season this year, especially because I think he's going to lead the Cowboys. The one I am picking, though, is Nick Chubb. We've talked about this a lot, or at least I've talked about this a lot. Stefanski has the perfect offensive set for what they're going to do. I think he can have a big season behind that offensive line that's rebuilt, plus a guy who gave Dalvin Cook the ball a lot. I think Chubb is going to get the ball a lot, and I think he's going to have the offensive player this season.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll get on to defensive player of the year now. I have candidates. I have Aaron Donald because you have to put him in as a candidate, although I'm not going to give him the award this time. You have Chandler Jones, who I have as a candidate because he is destined to be a candidate and not win it. The NFL seemingly the voters refuse to actually give him the award. I think the person that will win it though will be Myles Garrett. It seemed like he was the front runner to win it last year before he got accidentally swung his helmet at another man's head. I think that he seems like the odds-on favorite to win it. That's what I'm going there.
Yeah, so I had I had Watt and Garrett as well. I had the two Broncos guys as far as Chubb and Miller go. I think Jones can also be a candidate. If they go cornerback 2 years in a row, I really like Jalen Ramsey and Tre'Davious White. Aaron Donald, I'll probably go with Donald just because it's Aaron Donald. Kind of, it's like picking the Spurs in the mid 2000s to win the title. If Aaron Donald's healthy, he's probably one of the two or three best players for defense in football. So I'm just going to pick him. I think it's a safe pick.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We'll go on to offensive rookie of the year now. So two more, offensive rookie and defensive rookie. For me, I think I can't not pick a running back for offensive rookie of the year. It's not always a running back, but it's so much more, it's often than not is a running back. So the two candidates I have are J.K. Dobbins and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that both of them in the situation that they're in should be very good. But for their starting running back, I am going to go Cam Akers here. I think that he's going to get the carries with the Rams, and I think that he's a really good player.
That's a great pick. I think I think he's going to have a good year with Los Angeles. I'm not going to count out Joe Burrow just because they have a lot of talent in Cincinnati. And obviously, being the one quarterback starting that, I think that's an easy pick. I think if you're looking at receiver, I think Henry Ruggs is the best candidate because while I was higher on Judy and CeeDee Lamb coming out of the draft, I think that Ruggs is in a position where he can be the number one receiver right away. And I think he could have a good season. I think that's a good option. I'm going to go with DeAndre Swift. I think he could have a big year for Detroit. I think that's going to be an interesting pick. I thought personally, I like the ceiling of guys like J.K. Dobbins a lot more, but I thought Swift was the most complete back ready to go week one for an NFL season. And I still kind of feel that way. I think he can have a big year. I think Detroit's offense can be pretty good, and I think he could be a good option in the running back.
Yeah, not a bad pick. I'm not sure if he'll get the touches. I'm also not sure if he'll get the media attention. I think things out of his control are kind of the reason why I didn't have him as a candidate. Defensive player of the year, we both talked about in the past. Chase Young is the obvious front runner. For my two candidates, I have Isaiah Simmons and Patrick Queen as the two candidates. Honorable mention to Antoine Winfield, but again, I'm not going to go $2 here. I do think that, again, you do need some element of media attention. So I think like a Patrick Queen playing for a good team, that can help him. And I think Isaiah Simmons sort of being just a unique player could help him. I mean, we saw how Nick Bosa, I think it's fair. I thought Josh Allen could have got it. I'm not mad that Nick Bosa gets it. But the reason why it was such a runaway was largely because, he also got some media attention. I think that helps. But I think that for this, I think Chase Young is such a talent. It seems like he's, it's his to lose.
Yeah, I didn't really have any other candidates. It's Chase Young if he's healthy. I mean,
right.
In all seriousness, I think that the tough part with a lot of the other defensive players that I really liked is they're in positions that typically struggle their rookie seasons. Guys like CJ Henderson, guys like Derek Brown.
Right.
I think Queen and Kenneth Murray are very good picks. And I know you made a video on him too. I think Willie Gay is athletic enough to where you can make enough plays on defense as well to where he could be a candidate as well, but I don't know if he's going to be good enough his first season to be defensive rookie of the year. I just think he's an outside candidate and might be a little sleeper for somebody who likes that. But I think it's Chase Young's to lose, like you said. If he's healthy, he's winning it.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get on to we'll predict now the playoffs and everything like that. So we'll start off with the NFC, and I'll go first, and then I'll let you follow me. So I'm just going to go through the whole NFC. So by the time I finish talking, you will know who I have as the Super Bowl pick for the NFC. I'm going to go for the number 1 seed. I'm going to New Orleans Saints. I gave them the highest grade it might have been out of any team. Let me double check that real quick. 1 second. But yeah, I had them as the highest grade. They're definitely the most complete team. And yeah, yes, they were the highest overall by a pretty good margin, a solid 0.3 points over the next highest team, the Chiefs. I have them as the number 1 seed, 49ers number 2 seed, Packers number 3 seed, and Eagles as the number 4 seed. So Eagles win the division over Dallas. This now means that I have 5 playoff candidates. The 5 candidates I have is Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Seattle, the Rams, and the Cowboys. But the 3 teams that I am going to make playoff teams in the order of best to worst in terms of seeding, Tampa Bay gets the 5 seed, Seattle gets the 6 seed, and I'm giving Minnesota the 7 seed right here. And with that, it means that, again, the 4 division winners are the Saints, the 49ers, the Packers, and the Eagles. The 3 wild cards in the NFC, Vikings, Seahawks, Buccaneers. So now we get on to the playoffs. So with this, the way this works, first, Philadelphia plays Tampa Bay. I like Tampa Bay in this matchup. I'm going to give the win to Tampa Bay. Then we have Green Bay against Seattle, which, again, because they have to play against each other, I'm going to give Green Bay to win into that. And the San Francisco 49ers against the Vikings. We saw how it went last year. San Francisco wins. So now we have the 4 teams in the divisional round. New Orleans against Tampa Bay, division matchup. I think the winner of this, just to spoil a little bit, I think the winner of this game goes to the Super Bowl. I think the Saints win this football game, as much as it pains me to say. So I'm going to give the Saints the nod. For the 49ers and Packers, I have the 49ers winning. Again, we saw how it went last year. But then in the NFC Championship game, New Orleans, they beat San Francisco. They move on to the NFC. That is my pick for the NFC.
Yeah. So my NFC bracket. So I had, based on these rankings, I had a bunch of different playoff teams to sift through. We have no same division winners.
Wow.
Fun fact. So I am going to go with
really.
Yeah,
crazy.
I'm going to go with the Buccaneers as the 1 seed.
Okay.
I think that this is going to be an elite offensive group. Plus, they had a very good defense last year, who was just plagued by a guy who threw too many turnovers and put him in the worst position to be successful. And part of the reason why I have Arians as a coach of the year candidate, because I think they are going to get that 1 seed. So I have the Buccaneers as the 1 seed. I have the Seahawks winning the division, sneaking out over San Francisco as that 2 seed. I have the Vikings as the 3 seed over the Packers just because of that defense. I think it can be that good of a group. And we've talked enough about the Eagles and Cowboys. I have the Cowboys in the spot where you had the Eagles. From there, we have 3 playoff spots. I have the Saints, the Packers, and the 49ers, with barely missing out is the Eagles and the Rams, of course. I think the Saints are probably, in my book, the second best team in the NFC, but somebody has to win the division. Someone has to take the wild card spot. So whether it is the Buccaneers or the Saints in that 5 seed, they're probably going to feel wronged either way because I think they are the best 2 teams personally. The Packers are an elite group, I think, with Aaron Rodgers. And then the 49ers, I have the 7, which is probably the biggest shocker of the group. The only reason I say this with the 49ers is because we've seen so many of these teams that were Super Bowl losers the following year come out in kind of that slump with that slow start. So if they go out with that slow start, I think they're good enough to make the playoffs because they're that good of a team that they built a great roster. But I could see this team slipping in the start of the season and having to bounce back and claim that 7 spot. So from there, which makes it the toughest thing because I have the Seahawks and 49ers in round 1. That's the worst case scenario for a 2 seed to have to play the 49ers in the first round. So I'll go to the playoffs here. I have the Seahawks and 49ers, like I just said, in the first round. I'm going to take the Seahawks. I think they just, there's one weak group in this thing. It's the offensive line, obviously, with the Seahawks. I think they have a complete roster overall. Besides that, and, they've just proven to win football games without a great offensive line, which I don't think necessarily matters. An offensive line does matter, but they've proven to win a lot of football games without an offensive line. And I think if Russell Wilson's going to win the MVP, I think he's going to make a run in the playoffs. I'll take him over the 49ers. I have the Vikings and Packers in another divisional matchup in the first round. I'm going to flip this one. I'm actually going to go with the Packers here. I think the biggest difference is going to be, earlier in the year, I said I think the Vikings have a higher ceiling than the Packers, but if they're matching up, I'm betting on Rodgers over Cousins. And I just think that's a big thing. Cowboys and Saints. I have the Saints by a lot, even in Dallas. I just think the Saints, like I said, that's a tough matchup for them. So with that, moving on, I have the Buccaneers and Packers, 1 versus 6. I have the Buccaneers moving on. And then from there, we have the Seahawks. And if I'm looking at this right, the Saints. I think some more Russell Wilson magic is going to happen at home. There might be fans by that time in January. I'm going to go with the Seahawks making it to the division or the NFC Championship game against the Buccaneers, where I have the Seahawks winning and going to the Super Bowl.
Wow, Seahawks. I liked yours a lot better up until you said the NFC Championship game. Just in terms of what I would want to see happen. That's interesting. Not the team that I would have that I have, obviously, and definitely kind of an interesting route you have them getting there. But listen, Seattle's really good, and I think that would definitely make the Jamal Adams trade worth it. I think for me, I think the number 1 seed has a huge advantage. But let's get into the AFC, and then we'll decide who's going to actually win the Super Bowl. So I have the Saints. You have Seattle. I'll do this first. I'm going to do it in a little bit of a weird order. So I'm going to do I think the 3 seed is the Tennessee Titans, and I think the 4 seed is the Buffalo Bills. I think both those two teams win their respective divisions. I think that's where to end up. I think that the 1 and 2 seeds are, in no particular order, the Chiefs and the Ravens. I think that picking the number 1 seed is going to be tough. And I thought a lot about this because I think this is a huge difference in who's going to end up winning. I think that I was saying Baltimore throughout basically, the entire offseason. I was like, once this 1 seed thing, that's a huge advantage for Baltimore. Kansas City is going to have to be a lot less tired or a lot more tired. Baltimore has this huge advantage that we all know. It's a huge advantage to, have that bye. Even forget about you don't have the chance of losing in wild card weekend, but you also just get that extra rest. But then the Earl Thomas thing happened yesterday. And then I'm like, I don't know. Is this an equalizer? Does Kansas City now end up as the number 1 seed? I thought about it. I'm still going to give it to Baltimore. One of the huge reasons why I'm giving the number 1 seed to Baltimore is the schedule. The Ravens play the NFC East, probably the weakest NFC division, and the AFC South, which if that's not the weakest AFC division, it's the second weakest. It's them or the Patriots. And again, it's not quite so simple because it's like you want kind of, if you're a good team, you're expected to beat everybody, but it's like who could potentially beat you? They play the AFC South, whereas the Chiefs play the NFC South, probably the worst division they could be going up against. And the AFC East, again, kind of an easier one, but at the same time, they could lose to Buffalo. They could lose to New England. In fact, a lot of those teams have really good secondaries, which is kind of a matchup problem for Kansas City. I think Kansas City's fine. I think they'll be the number 2 seed, but I could see them going like 12-4 again, whereas Baltimore ends up going 13-3 or 14-2. So with that, I now have once again, there's 5 teams I think have potential to make the wild card. I have New England, I have Pittsburgh, Las Vegas, the Broncos, and the Browns. The 3 teams I'm going to pick here, and the 2 I'm leaving out. Number 5 seed, I'm giving to the Steelers. I think their defense is just too good. The 6th seed, I'm giving to the Raiders. I've already talked about why I like them. And the 7th seed, I am giving to Denver, meaning the New England Patriots missing out on the playoffs altogether, and the Cleveland Browns as well. That's not that surprising, but the New England Patriots missing out on the playoffs, which means that for the wild card weekend in the AFC, first you have the Chiefs versus Broncos. Chiefs win. You have the Titans Raiders. This one could be a really good game. Honestly, I'm really not sure. So I'm just going to give it to the Raiders to pander to my audience. But honestly, that one could go either way. We'll give it to Raiders. And then for the 4 or 5 seed, I'm going to give it to Pittsburgh here. I think Pittsburgh is better than Buffalo. I think they're a similar team. I think Pittsburgh is better on offense, and I think they're better on defense. So I think I'm going to give it to Pittsburgh. Meaning that for the 2 divisional games, you have Baltimore against the Raiders. Baltimore wins. You have the Chiefs against the Steelers. Kansas City wins. So now it's that 1 versus 2 matchup in the AFC Championship, the game we've all been wanting to see, Baltimore against Kansas City. I am going to give this to Baltimore. I think that the Baltimore Ravens go on to the Super Bowl, largely because of the bye. I think the bye really helps. I also think that, all those games have been close, but I think when you have the extra rest, you have home field advantage. As you said, I think there's a real chance there are fans in the game at that point. I kind of got to give this to Baltimore here. I think Baltimore is going to the Super Bowl. I don't think that's that crazy to say that Baltimore has the easier schedule. They'll end up as the 1 seed, and that could be the difference in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I think the schedule is going to help Baltimore. I agree with you on 1 too. I think that Baltimore is going to win based on that schedule. I think they're going to win that 1 seed for the AFC. I could see them having the best record in football again. I have the Chiefs. I mean, it's not really a shock. So yeah. I thought the AFC, like I said, got a lot better, but I still feel like there's 2 teams ahead of everybody else, and then there's everybody else battling for spots 3 through 7. But I think there's a lot of good teams in spots 3 through 7. They're just not as good as those top 2. So I have those 2 teams as 1 and 2. Obviously, if those 2 guys stay healthy, there's no reason to change that. I have the Patriots as a 3 seed. I think that, it backs up my stance on Bill Belichick winning Coach of the Year. I think he puts it together. I think they put together still a 10-6 or 11-5 season, which then has the Patriots haters who are saying that Belichick couldn't win without Brady, or Brady couldn't win without Belichick, going back and forth on all sorts of confusion because the Patriots are going to win 10 games without Brady, but Brady's going to win Brady's going to win the NFC and have the number 1 seed for the Buccaneers. So they're just going to go back and forth even more. I think the Patriots are going to go 10-6 and end up as a 3 seed. And my other candidate for Coach of the Year was Frank Reich. I think the Colts are going to win that division. I think they're a pretty complete team that I think are going to be very good. I think Phillip Rivers is going to limit the turnovers a little more this next season, so I think that helps. 5 seed, I'm with you all the way. Steelers, I think they're a very good team. They're just not Baltimore. That is going to be very good. Then my playoff teams were the Bills, Titans, Texans, Broncos, and Browns. I went with the Browns as the 6th seed because, I've talked about it to death. That offensive line is better. They're going to have a very good defense if Myles Garrett stays on the field. Stefanski's going to run the ball. They're not going to ask Baker to do much, and when he has to do a little bit, he's throwing to Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. That helps. Plus Austin Hooper, too. Excuse me. So I have the Browns as a 6th seed. As a 7th seed, I went with Denver. I think that this is a playoff team. I think this defense is going to be very good. This pass rushing group is going to be very good with Bradley Chubb back, and I liked a lot of what I saw out of Drew Walk. Plus, he has good receivers next to him. I think this is going to be a very good group. I'm going to go with Denver as the 7th seed, which brings me to my playoffs. I like the Chiefs over the Broncos. I actually really like this matchup because I'm really excited to see Miller and Chubb go against Mahomes. I think this can be a fun game, but I am going to go with the Chiefs. They're just better. I'm going to go with the Patriots over the Browns. At the end of the day, I think the Browns are good enough to make the playoffs. I think they are a bounce back candidate. But if I'm having Baker Mayfield go up against Bill Belichick, I like Bill Belichick. Breaking news. I have the Patriots winning that one. I have 1, 2, and 3 moving on because obviously one gets the bye. And then 4 and 5, I have the Colts and Steelers. I'm going to pick the Steelers there just because I think that defense is good enough to win them a playoff game. I think they move on, which puts us against the Ravens and Steelers, which I think is a fun game to see because that defense going up against Lamar Jackson, which, and then the Ravens with their playoff demons of the last couple of seasons. I am going to go with the Ravens, though. I think they battle back and win this game. I think that's going to be a fun game overall, but I think the Ravens are a better team. And that's kind of ditto for the other playoff game here, Chiefs and Patriots. Like I said, I think there's 2 teams above everybody else as they're healthy. I think the Chiefs are just a better team than New England. And I don't think Bill Belichick has enough magic to work that out in his favor. And I hate when we agree, but I'm going with the Ravens over the Chiefs. I think the Ravens
All
get
right.
a season, and I think they make the Super Bowl.
So you've seen the light. I've convinced one person that the Baltimore Ravens might actually be the bet favorites in the AFC.
The thing is when we were talking about the AFC North, I brought up a lot of that stuff with Lamar is can he come back and win a game then they really need him? But, I think it's fair to have that conversation now, but every young player across all sports, whether it's, LeBron James, whether it's Peyton Manning throughout all those years until they beat Chicago in the Super Bowl, every great young player has these conversations. Clayton Kershaw is another one. Can he do it in the postseason? I think he does do it. I think it's just a fair conversation to bring up now, and I think he does it this year. I think they make the Super Bowl. I think they're the best roster still in football.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that they got. I think the only one team getting a bye, I think, helps them a lot too. I think that's a big advantage for them. So for the Super Bowl, I have Baltimore versus the Saints. I'm giving it to Baltimore. I think both these teams are great. I just think that the Saints, Baltimore does what they do better. They're greater at what they're great at, more so than the Saints. And I mean, we have seen Drew Brees kind of not played the best in postseason games recently. So I think it's fair to say Baltimore, although I could see that going either way. I'm going to take a guess. I think you also have Baltimore winning it over Seattle.
Yeah, so the big thing, it's my 2020 MVP prediction of Russell Wilson against the 2019 MVP Lamar Jackson. I would just love to see this game anyways. We could just make it happen. The reason why I had the Seahawks roll into the Super Bowl, I think, is because of the matchups that they have. 49ers would be a tough one for them, but if they play teams like the Saints and the Buccaneers, I just like that secondary to be able to get the job done. But the secondary doesn't really help them, I think, against Baltimore. And I think that's where that strength is kind of negated. And I think Baltimore wins the Super Bowl in that regard.
All right. Well, I'm happy that I am not the only person that thinks Baltimore favorites to win the Super Bowl. And again, it's kind of like it's all, again, like I say, it's all just what we think the best odds are. It's very logical that the Saints could win, the Chiefs could win. But I think that Baltimore is the favorite. So yeah, this is kind of a marathon show. First, I think this is a solid 40 minutes longer than our next longest podcast, but I thought it was good.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that very much. It's going to be interesting to see how our predictions pan out, and I can't wait to be grilled in the comments about it.
Oh yeah, well they're already going to be wrong because Justin Herbert, MVP, now that he's fixed some fundamentals in practice.
Oh yeah. Practice legend Justin Herbert. I can't wait.
Yes. All right. Well, if anyone listened to this whole thing, definitely appreciate it. I know it went on for a while, but I thought we had a good show. We'll still have to figure out what we're going to do for next week. But this whole series has been a blast. I think a really fun way to break down all these teams. Kyle, any final thoughts before we log off?
I'm just ready for football to start at this point,
Yeah.
We've gone through all these teams. I think it's going to be fun to see all these teams and how they pan out. Devontae Parker, calm down. But I'm excited for the season.
Oh my God. So the Devontae Parker hater, Kyle. I already have my introduction for next week. All right. But until next time, everyone.